Chapter 1467. That's the entrance to the mulberry forest. 2 hours later, Zhao Xingye led Lin Sun to a huge barren canyon. The end of the canyon was covered by a vast gray fog. Zhao Xingye looked there and said softly, "More than 10 years ago, the emperors had already entered. In addition, the voodoo barbarian camp and the alliance of 10,000 races also entered." Lin Sun looked at the scene at the end of the canyon and found that it was indeed different from that year. Back then, when he came here, although there was fog, it was very little, and it could not be said to be too dangerous. But at this time, just standing outside the entrance, Lin Sun felt a sense of danger coming to him. What on earth was hidden there? Lin Sun took a deep breath and said, "Senior, how should I go to meet the emperors and the others?" "Take this token and follow its aura." Zhao Xingye had already prepared a golden jade token engraved with mysterious Tao patterns and handed it to Lin Sun. "Remember, be careful." Lin Sun nodded and immediately asked, "The emperors and the others, what realm are they at?" He had speculated about this question many times and asked many people, but unfortunately, no one had given the answer so far. Quasi-emperor. Zhao Xingye gently spat out these 2 words, but it was earth-shattering, making Lin Sun's heart tremble and stunned. Quasi-emperor. The weight represented by these 2 words was enough to make any saint feel suffocated. Even the old fox Zhao Tailai is a quasi-emperor? Lin Sun couldn't help asking, as if he couldn't believe it. Zhao Xingye couldn't help smiling and said, "It's normal that you find it hard to believe. In the Empire, people are subject to the order of heaven and earth. Not to mention the quasi-emperor, even the king of sages will be restrained and their realm will be suppressed. The empire is like a small pond, and the quasi-emperor is like a dragon. If he wants to survive in the pond, he can only turn himself into a fish. But strictly speaking, the empire is not a small pond. You should have realized that with the occurrence of the upheaval, the order of heaven and earth of the empire is completely different from the past. In short, the reason why the emperors are willing to stay in the empire is to wait for the arrival of this upheaval and seize this great opportunity." At this point, Lin Sun managed to calm down a lot and said with a wry smile, "I didn't expect that the empire would be so powerful." Thinking about it, a barren place that was regarded as a lower world by the ancient Desolation realm, but there were many emperor-to-be experts hibernating. If this news spread to the ancient Desolation realm, who would dare to believe it? Not only our empire, but also the voodoo barbarian camp and the alliance of 10,000 races. Zhao Xingye said calmly, "The ancient Desolation realm is extraordinary. It is vast and magnificent, hundreds of times better than the mortal world. However, there is no ultimate, one of the 4 ancient Tao ruins, in the ancient Desolation realm. There is also no origin of chaos like the mulberry forest. This is where the foundation of the lower realm lies." Speaking of this, Zhao Xingye looked at Lin Sun and said, "Have you ever wondered why Lu Boya chose to stay here?" Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. "Is it also because the mortal world is very unusual?" Zhao Xingye nodded. "I didn't understand it before, but since I became a saint, I remembered some things in the past and found that the mortal world is really unusual. When you become a saint in the future, you will understand it. It's useless to say more now." Lin Sun nodded and collected his thoughts. He looked at the entrance of the mulberry forest in the distance and said, "Senior, goodbye." After saying that, he went straight forward. "Remember to be careful of the overmatches of the other 2 camps. These days, I have been looking for the traces of the enemy in the bloodthirsty battlefield, but I have found nothing. I suspect that Niu Zhenyu and the Dark Blood Holy Shaman have also entered the mulberry forest with their subordinate." Zhao Xingye reminded. Lin Sun couldn't help turning back and said, "Senior, aren't you curious about the big opportunity that broke out in the mulberry forest?" Zhao Xingye shook his head. "I can't reach that big opportunity. It's better to stay in the bloodthirsty battlefield and escort the young people of the empire." Lin Sun cupped his hands and said, It's a blessing for the Empire to have you. Go ahead. Zhao Xingye smiled and waved his hand. Lin Sun said no more and turned into the depths of the fog. As soon as he entered the foggy world, Lin Sun seemed to have changed into a different person. His qi was running all over his body. Although he looked calm, his whole body was like a fully drawn bow. There was an extremely strange power in the gray fog, which limited the spiritual awareness to a range of 3,000 meters. Lin Sun had to be vigilant. He didn't forget that the old man Du once said that there were not only saints, but also great saints, sage kings, and emperors to be found in the mulberry forest. After listening to Zhao Xingye's explanation, Lin Sun was sure that there were more than one emperor to be found. This was too horrible. If it weren't for an opportunity to break the forbidden Tao test, Lin Sun would never have stepped into this place. This was the path of seeking. Whether in the Empire or in the ancient Desolation realm, Lin Sun's name had been known all over the world and was respected by countless overmatches. But behind all these achievements and glory, there were countless efforts and sacrifices. Just like how fierce the 10 years of fighting in the Absolute Summit domain was. Just like the mulberry forest in front of him, who among his peers dared to risk his life like him. Clang! The broken sword swept out and was ready to go. Insignificant bow and blue arrow were also slung on Lin Sun's back. All this was a kind of vigilance and caution. Buzz in his hand, the golden jade token given by Zhao Xingye flowed a strange wave and guided him forward. Lin Sun moved forward in silence, looking alert. The world was silent, and the gray fog filled the air. The dead silence made people's hair stand on end. 2 hours later, in the distant fog, suddenly there was a shrill scream. Lin Sun suddenly stopped, and his expression was uncertain. The location of the scream happened to be on the road ahead of him. But in the end, Lin Sun decided to take a detour. He would rather avoid it than risk his life. It was a joke. If he met a true saint, it would be okay. But if he met a terrible existence above the great saint, he would definitely die. Lin Sun made a big detour and walked thousands of miles away. Then he started to move again, according to the guidance of the golden jade token. But it didn't take long for his face to sink. Because under the guidance of the golden jade token, he could only go back to the original path. Can't I get around it? Lin Sun was silent for a long time. Finally, he gritted his teeth and decided to go and have a look. Soon, a huge mountain that seemed to be made of iron and stone appeared in the gray mist. Lin Sun stepped up until he reached the top of the mountain. Then he found that a thick white bone ropeway was built on the cliff, leading to the depths of the gray fog. The white bone cableway was made up of many giant beast bones, and could only fit one person at a time. It floated above the misty abyss, and when the mountain wind blew, the white bone cableway swayed and made rustling noises. Lin Sun glanced around and looked down at the golden jade token in his hand. Finally, he decided that if he wanted to go on, he had to take the white bone ropeway in front of him. Whoosh! Lin Sun snapped his fingers and shot a stone into the high sky of the abyss. But halfway, the stone burst into pieces with a bang. At the same time, a group of bloody bats suddenly swept out from the depths of the high fog, making a ferocious and cold shriek. Each bloody bat was the size of a millstone, with blood-red wings and sharp fangs. The breath they exuded was even more terrifying. They appeared in groups and rushed towards Lin Sun. From a distance, they looked like a bloody torrent, which was extremely frightening. Whoosh! Lin Sun retreated without hesitation. But to his surprise, those bloody bats stopped in front of the white bone ropeway. Floating in the void, they stared at Lin Sun with scarlet eyes and let out a sharp shriek like a ghost's cry. They couldn't wait to kill Lin Sun, but they dared not leave the abyss penetrated by the white bone ropeway. Lin Sun was a little relieved. Then he realized that the sharp shriek he heard just now came from these ferocious bloody bats. Master, these are blood-resentful bats. They feed on the souls and hostility of the strong. They are the most violent and bloodthirsty. In ancient times, they were regarded as ominous creatures and hated by gods and ghosts, Little Silver said. Judging from their aura, they should have eaten the souls of saints to have such a ferocious aura. Lin Sun immediately frowned. He also noticed that those blood-resentful bats were unbelievably powerful. They were only slightly weaker than the pseudo-saints he had seen before. In the outside world, such a blood-resentful bat was enough to dominate and bring disaster to a region, making even longevity tribulation monarchs' hearts turn cold. But here they appeared in groups. It seems that if I want to cross this white bone ropeway, I have to kill them first. A cold light surged in Lin Sun's black eyes. When he left the absolute domain back then, he had killed a pseudo-saint. At that time, he was only at the longevity 7th tribulation realm, so it was very difficult for him to kill them. But now, he was already at the longevity 9th tribulation realm. Even if he encountered a pseudo-saint, he would not be afraid. Clang! The broken blade, which had been ready for a long time, swept out. At the same time, Lin Sun also moved. The qi and blood around his body rumbled, and the 9 pure Tao light flowed out of his body, turning into a huge abyss. In the acupoints in his body, 3,000 Taishian sword qi hummed. Poof! In an instant, the blood-resentful bat at the front could not dodge in time. It was torn apart by the sharp light of the broken blade, and its body exploded. The group of blood-resentful bats became restless and attacked crazily. They let out extremely shrill cries that shook the world. Visible to the naked eye, rolling blood-colored sound waves surged and spread. Slash! Lin Sun did not dodge. He was extremely fast, and in an instant, he had already charged into the swarm of blood-resentful bats. The broken blade danced like lightning. Around him, the 9 pure Tao light that had turned into a huge abyss also circulated crazily. Rumble for a moment, a fierce battle broke out, and blood splattered everywhere. From afar, Lin Sun looked like a sharp blade as he charged up the white bone ropeway. Everywhere he passed, the blood-resentful bats were either killed by the broken blade or crushed by the 9 pure Tao light. The thick smell of blood and shrill cries spread continuously. The scene was bloody and terrifying. Chapter 1468. Puff, puff. Numerous millstone-sized blood-spirit resentful bats exploded into pieces and transformed into a mist of blood that suffused the surroundings. Like a sharp awl, Lin Sun stepped on the white bone ropeway. His speed was not fast, but it was not slow either. After all, those blood-spirit resentful bats were not ordinary. Their fighting capacity was comparable to Niu Tunshin and Meng Lianqing. Lin Sun was able to fight his way out of the encirclement alone. If this scene was seen by the strong people in the camp of the Empire, they would be shocked again. Whoosh, however, to Lin Sun's surprise, as he stepped on the white bone ropeway, hundreds of blood-spirit resentful bats rushed out of the gray mist above the ropeway. Endless. The scene was like the outbreak of a beast tide. The whole world was filled with deafening shrill shriek. Such creatures were good at sound wave attack. Now they were shrieking together. If it were any other strong person, he would not have been able to hold on. But Lin Sun did not flinch. Clattered dense strands of grand mystery sword qi flashed out from his body, and they were dazzling like a peerless divine ray of light as they transformed into the hellish annihilation sword formation that suddenly circulated. In an instant, dozens of blood-spirit resentful bats were mercilessly slaughtered. The thick blood poured down like a waterfall. The scene was extremely shocking. But Lin Sun looked calm and didn't stop from the beginning to the end. The snow-white broken sword swept through the air. Controlled by the divine consciousness, Lin Sun performed the 6 cuts of Tianyuan, which was extremely fierce and murderous. Around him, the 9 pure Tao light evolved into a big abyss, which was not only a terrible defensive means but also a killing move to crush the opponent. The sword formation evolved by Taishian sword qi opened the way in front of him. The brilliant sword qi crisscrossed with irresistible force all the way. At this moment, Lin Sun's 3 cultivation, soul refining, body refining, and chi refining, were running at the same time. The power burst out was enough to shock even a sage. It could be seen how powerful the attack of these blood-spirit resentful bats was. Otherwise, Lin Sun would not have been forced to fight with all his strength. After a while, Lin Sun came to the end of the white bone ropeway. It was a cliff of a majestic mountain. There was a crack in the cliff for people to pass through. Seeing this, Lin Sun rushed over without hesitation. Even though he wasn't afraid of those blood-soul vengeful bats, these monsters were too numerous and seemed to be inexhaustible, causing him to be extremely vexed. Boom! But before Lin stepped on the other side of the white bone ropeway, a white bone hammer suddenly rushed out of the crack in the cliff and smashed at Lin. It was too fast. It was like a long-planned strike, waiting for Lin Sun to show up. Moreover, the aura emitted by the white bone hammer was vast, divine, and mighty to the extreme. At this extremely dangerous moment, a pair of black burning god wings appeared on Lin Sun's back. His figure flashed and avoided the attack. At the same time, Lin finally saw the attacker clearly. Dark blood divine witch. His skinny figure was like a shadow, standing on the cliff path with a cold expression. "It's you again, old bastard." Lin's face darkened. Not long ago, he'd been pursued by the dark blood holy shaman during the Tao Observation Mountain tournament. How could he not recognize this old bastard? "Hand over the wings on your back and I'll allow you to come over." The dark blood holy shaman's expression was cold, and his eyes flickered with a terrifying divine light. Lin soon remembered that before he came here, he'd heard a sharp screech. Obviously, this was the attack of the sanguine resentful bats when the dark blood holy shaman crossed the white bone ropeway. "Old bastard, you're seriously injured and have no choice but to escape here, but you still have the time to think about my treasure. How bold of you!" Lin Sun sneered. Rumble. As soon as he finished speaking, a group of sanguine resentful bats pounced at Lin Sun. He couldn't care about anything else and had no choice but to fight. Seeing this, the dark blood holy shaman couldn't help but sneer. "Little thing, humans die in pursuit of wealth, and birds die in pursuit of food. You're already in a desperate situation, and you're still unwilling to hand over a treasure?" He had nothing to fear. Because he'd explored this place, he knew very well that as long as Lin Sun was on the white bone ropeway, he would be attacked continuously by the sanguine resentful bat. And the only way out was now under his control. Behind the dark blood holy shaman, there was a man and a woman. The man had handsome features and pale skin, and his whole body was shrouded in a layer of shadow. The woman exuded the aura of light. She was extremely beautiful, dignified like a goddess. They were the two voodoo barbarians known as the Twins of Light and Darkness. "Is he the one who killed Nyo Tunshin and Meng Lianqing?" asked the man. His name was Dark Spirit, and he looked at Lin Sun with a touch of disgust. "Of course it's him. He's not a saint yet, but he can pass through the white bone ropeway alone. His combat power is really terrifying." The woman's eyes flashed coldly. Her name was Light Floating Qingguang. "Holy shaman, kill him quickly. We can't let you live." Dark Spirit's face was gloomy. He sensed an unprecedented threat from Lin Sun, which made his heart palpitate. "Okay." The dark blood holy shaman nodded. With a buzz, the white bone hammer swept up again and rushed to Lin Sun. Boom! Terrible divine power emerged from the white bone hammer at an incredible speed. The destructive aura it produced was so strong that all the sanguine resentful bats along the way were smashed into pieces. Lin Sun took a deep breath, and with an unprecedented burst of strength, he swung the broken blade horizontally. Bang! In the sound of the collision, Lin Sun staggered back more than 30 meters. His whole body trembled, and he was so uncomfortable that he almost coughed up blood. However, his eyes lit up. This was his first battle after stepping into the 9th retribution of the longevity realm, and his opponent was a true saint. Although this attack made him feel extremely uncomfortable, He had blocked it after all. In the past, this was something Lin Sun would never have dared to imagine. It should be known that a true saint was completely different from a false saint. It was not easy to say that those under the saint realm were like ants. But now, he had indeed blocked it. This, in the distance, dark spirit and light fucking were shocked. They almost couldn't believe it and felt that it was unimaginable. In the eyes of a saint, the king on the path to immortality was also like an ant. But now, this attack was blocked by an ant. Who would dare to believe it? Humph! If I hadn't been seriously injured by Zhao Xingye, do you think I would still be alive after this attack? The dark blood holy shaman's face darkened. He seemed to feel embarrassed and angry. Boom! As he spoke, he attacked again without hesitation. The white bone hammer flew through the air, flowing with divine power, and tore through the air toward Lin Sun. However, at this moment, the burning god wings on Lin Sun's back flashed, and he disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, he appeared in front of the dark blood holy shaman, and in his palm, the great Tao immeasurable bottle that seemed to be polished from sheep fat appeared. Although the bottle was only a few inches large, the dark blood holy shaman's heart trembled when he saw it, and he felt a fatal threat. Oh no! Just as he was about to dodge, he saw a shining spear shoot out from the great Tao immeasurable bottle. This was the power that Zhao Xingye had left behind. It was the full power of a true saint, and with the support of the great Tao immeasurable bottle, the power of this attack had multiplied. At this moment of life and death, the dark blood holy shaman suddenly roared, "Little bastard, you won't survive either." Boom! The terrifying sound of the collision resounded and shook the universe. A terrifying wave of energy swept through, causing the entire world to wail. But strangely, whether it was the white bone cableway or the nearby cliff walls, they were not damaged by this terrifying wave of energy. However, the dark blood holy shaman's skinny figure was pierced by a spear, and his entire body was sent flying. He let out a shrill cry of pain. As for Lin Sun, his figure was also sent flying like a kite with a broken string, and he fell into the abyss below the white bone cableway. The abyss was covered in a hazy gray mist, and Lin Sun's figure quickly disappeared. The dark blood holy shaman and Guang Fucking, who had narrowly escaped death, were stunned. They felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. The scene just now had shocked them so much that their souls almost flew out of their bodies. They could not believe that the dark blood holy shaman could be pierced and sent flying. Oh no! Let's go check on the Lord Holy Shaman. Suddenly, the dark blood holy shaman shuddered, and he flew into the distance. In this dangerous and terrifying mulberry forest, if the dark blood holy shaman died, with his and Guang Fucking strength, they would not be able to move an inch. Guang Fucking's body stiffened, and he hurriedly chased after him. Soon, the two of them saw the dark blood holy shaman. His body was broken and shattered, and only a wisp of his primordial spirit was left swaying in the void. He looked extremely miserable. Lord Holy Shaman! The two of them were filled with grief and indignation. Even now, they could not understand how Lin Sun could actually injure the dark blood holy shaman. This was simply too unbelievable. The treasure in this boy's hands is too magical. If not for that, I would not have suffered such injuries. The dark blood holy shaman panted, and his voice was hoarse. He only had a wisp of his primordial spirit left, and his body had already turned into a pile of flesh and blood. This filled him with hatred. A dignified true saint had been injured to this extent by an ant-like thing. This was a great humiliation. However, this boy was also hit by my palm and fell into the abyss. He will definitely die. The dark blood holy shaman gritted his teeth. It's good that he's dead, it's good that he's dead. The dark blood holy shaman murmured. He did not dare to imagine that if Lin Sun was still alive, it would be a terrifying nightmare. He could injure a true saint even though he was not a saint. Just the thought of it made his heart tremble. Lord Holy Shaman, how are your injuries? Guang fucking asked worriedly. I won't die. The dark blood holy shaman gritted his teeth. However, I need to meditate here for a period of time. You guys protect me. Alright. The dark blood holy shaman and Guang fucking nodded. At the same time, Lin Sun's body continued to fall in the mist of the abyss. Blood spurted out from his mouth and nose, and his consciousness was blurred. The dark blood holy shaman's desperate palm had also seriously injured him. If it was not for his amazing physique refining strength, he would not have been able to withstand such a killing blow. At this moment, out of instinct, Lin Sun struggled with all his might and wanted to fly up. However, what chilled him was that there was an invisible taboo force in the abyss that pressed down on his body. Not only was he unable to struggle, but his body was also being pressed down continuously. After an unknown period of time, there was a loud bang. Stinky mud splashed everywhere, and Lin Sun's body was smashed into the mud. The intense pain made his vision go black, and he almost fainted. P.S. Thank you Blue Feather Breeze for your gift. Chapter 1469. Lin Sun felt a strong pain all over his body, making him dizzy. This time, he was seriously injured. How could the destructive power of being hit by a true saint be ordinary? Old bastard! Lin Sun gritted his teeth. At the same time, he was frightened. A true saint, who had been seriously injured by Zhao Xingye before, could still burst out such power in a desperate fight. It was really terrible. It was also at this time that Lin Sun deeply realized the meaning of the word, all the people under the saint realm are like ants. This was the saint realm. Strictly speaking, it was the power possessed by a true saint. It was almost impossible to kill a true saint by crossing a great realm. After a while, Lin Sun struggled to get up from the ground, but his body suddenly sank. He was oppressed by an invisible taboo force and fell to the ground again. What's this? Why is the abyss full of such strange power? Lin Sun's heart sank and he glanced around. The surrounding area was covered by thick gray mist, and he could vaguely see that the place he was in was a swamp. The strange thing was that the swamp was scarlet red, as if it was dyed red by blood, and it emitted a disgusting stench that assaulted the nose and caused one to feel nauseous. Pieces of decayed broken bones were floating on the swamp, like the withered lotus leaves growing in the bloody swamp, which was extremely horrifying. Were these the corpses of the strong people who died here? Lin Sun narrowed his eyes, and a sense of unsteadiness suddenly arose in his heart. He felt goosebumps all over his body, as if there was some horrible existence lurking in the depths of the mist at the bottom of the abyss. Silver, help me protect. Lin Sun didn't dare to question and ordered. Whoosh! Silver rushed out and glanced around with a dignified look. He also noticed that this place was extremely strange, which made him feel very depressed and palpitate. Clatter at the same time, Lin Sun had run the power of the law of immortality, and took out a healing medicine to swallow, and began to heal himself with all his strength. Crack! But it didn't take long for the sound of bones breaking suddenly sounded in the gray mist, which was particularly harsh in this silent atmosphere. Little Silver's heart tightened, and with a clang, he drew his sword and waited. Lin Sun was secretly anxious. If a battle were to break out at this time, he would only be able to exert 30% of his combat strength at most. Moreover, because of his heavy injuries, if he were to forcefully engage in battle, it was extremely likely that the foundation of his great path would be damaged. However, his expression remained calm. He remembered the token that Do So had given him, and he also remembered that he still had one more chance to seek help from the mysterious woman. If he was really forced into a desperate situation, Lin Sun wouldn't mind using these trump cards. The gray mist tumbled, and a white skeleton creature that looked like a fox walked out of the mist. Its entire body was broken and dark, and it didn't even have any flesh, blood, or fur. However, when it appeared, a boundlessly terrifying aura spread out along with it. In particular, its empty eye sockets burned with blood-red flames. When it stared at Lin Sun and Little Silver, both of them stiffened and felt like they were suffocating. It was too terrifying. It was just a broken skeleton creature, but the aura it emitted was even more terrifying than that of a saint. What the hell was this? Little Silver and Lin Sun looked at each other in shock. It was certain that this broken skeleton must have been a fox with extremely powerful cultivation when it was alive. Boom! The white-boned fox didn't move at all, but a fierce and bloody force suddenly came out, sweeping towards Lin Sun and Little Silver like a landslide and a tsunami. At this moment, the two seemed to be imprisoned. They didn't even have the power to struggle, let alone resist. The gap in strength was too great. It was like an ant facing the attack of a dragon, which was despairing. Buzz, but at this moment, a ray of dim yellow mottled light emerged from Lin Sun's body. With a gentle sweep, the fierce and bloody aura that swept out disappeared. Then, a dim yellow oil lamp appeared above Lin Sun's head. The light swayed and sprinkled mottled halo, bringing a kind of quiet and peaceful power. No blame lamp. This magical treasure was obtained by Lin Sun from the skeleton boatman in the forbidden land of Styx River in the domain of despair. It was with this lamp that Lin Sun was trapped at the bottom of Styx River without suffering. Until now, Lin Sun still clearly remembered that the skeleton boatman once said, "One day, if you go to the ancient way of starry sky, please use this lamp to guide those lonely souls and wild ghosts who are lost on the way." According to the skeleton boatman, the pursuit of Tao was like a boat sailing in the sea of bitterness. If there was no lamp to guide, how could one illuminate the way forward and return? The higher the realm, the more difficult the Tao was. As long as one pursued it, no one could guarantee that he wouldn't be lost on the Tao. The name, No Blame Lamp, implied that there was no blame to be blamed and no mistakes would be made. What Lin Sun really remembered was that the skeleton boatman once told him that the Tao was unknown and a lamp could illuminate the unknown. If he encountered an unsolvable dilemma when he became a saint, he could inject a drop of heart blood into this lamp, and there might be a chance to solve it. However, Lin Sun didn't expect that the No Blame Lamp would appear at this critical moment and solve a fatal problem for him. At this time, the dim light of the No Blame Lamp swayed and covered Lin Sun with a layer of illusory luster. What moved Lin Sun most was that the pair of blood-red eyes of the white-boned fox showed a touch of confusion after seeing the No Blame Lamp, and then became so excited that the bones all over its body were rattling. It seemed to want to approach, but it didn't dare, hesitating and hesitating. But Lin Sun could clearly feel that this white-boned fox seemed to see a kind of hope. The fierce aura emitted from its body disappeared without a trace, and its breath became gentle and calm. In the end, it even squatted on the ground and looked at the No Blame Lamp quietly. This scene was so strange that Lin Sun and Little Silver were a little stunned. After a while, they secretly breathed a sigh of relief and realized that with the No Blame Lamp, the white-boned fox should not commit murder again. Inexplicably, Lin Sun once again thought of what the skeleton boatman had said, "Please use this lamp to guide the lonely souls and wild ghosts who are lost on the way." Lin Sun looked at the white-boned fox in the distance thoughtfully. Was this the reason? Did it need the No Blame Lamp to guide it? Dong! Dong! In the gray mist, suddenly there was a dull sound of footsteps, like surging thunder, and then a huge figure appeared. This was a skeleton giant, but he was wearing a broken blood-stained ancient armor and carrying a huge blood-red broken sword on his back. The bones all over his body showed a kind of dark gold, branded with the traces of the Great Way, but they were all fragmented, blurred, and damaged. The aura of this skeleton giant, carrying the blood-red broken sword and wearing broken armor, was even much stronger than that of the white-boned fox. Lin Sun and Little Silver were stiff all over. Here came another terrible guy. Roar! The white-boned fox squatting on the ground let out a roar. When it looked at the skeleton giant, its gentle aura was replaced by a fierce and bloody aura. It seemed to be extremely vigilant and aware of the danger. The skeleton giant ignored it. In its empty eye sockets there was also a pair of burning blood-red eyes like a pair of torches. When it saw the no-blame lamp with a dim yellow halo, the skeleton giant suddenly became motionless, as if it was stunned, and the terrible aura around it also converged. Later, it did not hesitate to sit on the ground, with the broken sword on its back across its knees. Its back was straight like a peerless sword master. Seeing this, the white-boned fox gradually calmed down. It squatted on the ground and stared at the no-blame lamp with gentle eyes and an indescribable strange expression. Seeing this, Lin Sun and Little Silver concluded that as long as there was the no-blame lamp, no matter how many terrible monsters rushed at them, there should be no accident. "Master, what should we do?" Little Silver transmitted his voice. "Don't move first. Wait for me to recover from my injury, and then choose an opportunity to act," Lin Sun instructed. He took a deep breath, no longer paying attention to the white-boned fox and the skeleton giant, and seized all the time to start healing. Surprisingly, the white-boned fox and the skeleton giant seemed to turn a blind eye to this, and there was no reaction at all. At this point, Lin Sun was completely at ease. However, Lin Sun himself didn't know that with the appearance of the no-blame lamp here, under the abyss, in the grey mist in all directions, horrible auras that had been silent for many years began to wake up from the silence. Then, they all gathered here. Whoosh! A huge bone bird came across the sky, and its fierce aura shook the grey mist in all directions. Looking carefully, the shape of the bone bird was very similar to the legendary immortal phoenix. However, its wings were broken, and its body was incomplete. Although its bones were as crystal as divine gold, they were filled with wisps of death chi. Soon after, a corpse that looked like the old turtle appeared. The giant skeleton was like a mountain of bones, and it was missing one of its 4 hooves. When it strode over, heaven and earth shook, as if a continent was moving horizontally. Whoosh! Then, a tree with a withered body and broken branches appeared. It was thousands of meters high, with wisps of thunder and lightning flashing on its trunk, exuding a horrible aura of destruction. Every horrible monster had a fierce aura when they appeared, but when they saw the no-blame lamp, their fierceness faded away, just like the white-boned fox and the skeleton giant. They waited there quietly, looking at the lamp. It was as if that lamp was their only hope. Little Silver saw all this. Although he knew that there should be no danger with the no-blame lamp, he was still nervous to the extreme. He was sure that once any of these horrible monsters took action, they could definitely kill him and Lin Sun easily. However, even he couldn't figure out what was going on with these horrible monsters. They didn't seem to be completely dead, but they were neither human nor ghost, with a frightening appearance and horrible aura. Time passed little by little. Lin Sun also noticed all this, but his heart gradually calmed down. He knew that with the no-blame lamp, there would be a chance to get out of trouble. His top priority was to completely recover from his injuries as soon as possible. 2 days later, Lin Sun, who was meditating, was suddenly awakened by a low, vigorous and intermittent voice. "Go home, go home." Lin Sun opened his eyes and saw a strange and horrible monster standing not far away. P.S. This is an automatic update. For the sake of the 2 consecutive updates on time these days, don't forget to vote for it. Chapter 1470. It was a heart riddled with holes. It was only the size of a palm, and its color was dry and black. But the breath it emitted was so horrible that all the other monsters nearby retreated. Lin Sun was stunned. Was the heart talking? "Go home," the broken heart said in a low voice again. "Master, I suspect that this is the heart of an emperor." Little Silver's expression was grave, and his body was stiff as he transmitted this message. Lin Sun took a deep breath. The heart was riddled with holes and filled with the breath of time, but it still had such a horrible momentum. It was really surprising that it should be from an emperor. "But my injury hasn't healed yet." Lin Sun plucked up his courage and said tentatively. "Go home." The broken heart seemed to remember only the word "go home" and kept repeating it. Lin soon glanced at other monsters and found that after 3 days, 7 horrible creatures of different shapes had gathered nearby. There was a bone fox, a bone giant, a bone fairy phoenix, an old bone turtle, a scorched tree, a big bone snake, and the broken heart in front of him. Among them, the broken heart was the most terrible. Lin soon sensed his own condition and found that his injury had almost recovered by half. It would take at least 7 days for him to recover completely. This was with the help of the law of immortality and the divine medicine. Otherwise, the recovery would be slower. But at this time, Lin soon didn't know whether to continue healing. Because the breath of the broken heart had been locking on him, repeating the word "go home" in a low, intermittent voice. "But I don't know where your home is," Lin soon said again. But the response was still "go home." Lin soon couldn't help frowning. He vaguely felt that the 7 monsters not far away seemed to be extremely powerful, but seemed to have no consciousness. Only an instinctive will drove them to act. They were like the living dead. After thinking for a moment, Lin soon stood up and held the lamp of no blame in his hand. Suddenly, the 7 monsters, who had been crawling or squatting around, stood up at the same time, ready to follow Lin soon. Strictly speaking, they were going to go with the lamp of no blame. Seeing this, Lin soon lifted his foot and moved forward. As expected, he found that those horrible monsters also followed him. It was like the blame-free lantern in their hands was a wisp of hope, and it was capable of guiding their path towards the Tao. What surprised Lin even more was that the taboo power that had enveloped the abyss couldn't suppress the lamp of no blame. It was as if the taboo power was the omnipresent darkness, and the innocent lamp was a torch that could burn a hole in the darkness and bring light. Lin Sun was shocked. Only then did he realize that it was so easy to get out of trouble. He flew up, and as the dim yellow shadow of the innocent lamp scattered down, sure enough, he discovered that it was no different from the outside world, and he could fly freely. Boom! Behind Lin Sun, a group of ferocious beasts also moved out, each of them looking extremely excited. Standing on Lin Sun's shoulder, Little Silver asked worriedly, "Master, what if those terrible monsters are no longer afraid of the lamp of no blame when we leave this abyss?" Lin Sun gritted his teeth and said, "It's okay. If there is any accident, I have my own means to deal with it." "But you haven't fully recovered from your injuries," said Little Silver. Lin Sun said with a strange look on his face, "Little Silver, if we have these terrible monsters following us, who would dare to harm us?" Little Silver was stunned, and a strange expression also appeared on his handsome little face. He raised his thumb and said, "The fox assumes the tiger's might. Master, your means are so clever." Lin Sun glared at him. "What do you mean by assuming the tiger's might? You don't even know how to flatter me." Little Silver grinned. "Let's go." Without further delay, Lin Sun flew to the sky above the abyss. In his hand, the dim yellow shadow of the blame-free lantern was like the light that broke through the darkness, causing the taboo power to disperse. Behind him, a group of horrible monsters followed closely. It didn't take long for Lin Sun to get on the white bone ropeway in the void. Looking back, he found that those horrible monsters were calm like a group of obedient followers, and didn't reveal any abnormal killing intent. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. A mournful shriek sounded from the gray mist covering the sky. It was very familiar. Lin soon knew that the sanguine resentful bats were coming again. Just as he was about to fight, he saw a group of horrible monsters behind him raise their heads in unison and look at the sky with blood-red eyes. Then, the bodies of the sanguine resentful bats that had rushed out of the mist just now exploded before they could react. Moreover, the mournful shriek in the depths of the mist stopped abruptly, as if they had been greatly frightened. No more sanguine resentful bats rushed out. At this time, those horrible monsters withdrew their gazes and looked at the blame-free lantern in Lin Sun's hand, and their expressions became calm again. Lin Sun saw all this. He was shocked, and his heart couldn't help beating violently and his mouth was dry. If he had such a group of horrible monsters with him, wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted in the mulberry forest? It feels so good to assume the tigers might. Little Silver was also stunned and let out a cry of surprise. He felt like he had a group of powerful bodyguards behind him. Little Silver, that's not a good description. Lin Sun glanced at the little guy. It should be called borrowing strength to fight strength. At this moment, a cry rang out from the crack in the cliff in the distance. "You little bastard, you're still alive." Lin Sun turned his head and immediately saw the dark blood divine shaman standing on the path of the crack in the cliff, as well as dark spirit Zhen and light fucking beside him. This surprised Lin Sun. Even the power of the great Wei immeasurable bottle hadn't been able to kill the dark blood divine shaman completely? After 3 days of full recovery, the dark blood divine shaman had already rebuilt a new body. Although his injuries were still very serious, he had relatively recovered some of his combat strength. When he saw Lin Sun, the ant who had almost killed him, his withered old face instantly darkened to the extreme. "This time, I'd like to see how you're going to escape," the dark blood divine shaman roared angrily. Lin Sun smiled. Instead of retreating, he advanced and stepped forward. Then, the dark blood divine shaman's voice stopped abruptly. His expression changed abruptly, as if he had seen a ghost. As Lin Sun strode forward, a heart riddled with holes first appeared under the white bone cableway behind him, then a bone bird in the shape of an immortal phoenix, followed by a skeleton giant with a broken sword on its back, a scorched tree, and a white bone fox. Every time a terrifying ferocious creature appeared, the dark blood sacred sorcerer's expression would change, and the aura around it would collapse. When an old turtle that was as large as a mountain slowly walked out, the dark blood sacred sorcerer's expression was completely frozen, and its eyeballs almost popped out. At this moment, his entire being seemed to be in a mess, and he couldn't stop gasping. The dark blood divine shaman was indeed scared out of his wits, and his soul almost left his body. The aura emitted by each of those terrifying creatures was unbelievably powerful, causing his heart to tremble. When they appeared in groups, just the aura they emitted was enough to make the dark blood divine shaman's legs tremble, and his lips tremble. As for dark spirit Zhen and light fucking, they were completely dumbfounded, and their minds were shocked in an instant. This was too terrifying. Lin Sun's heart settled, and he charged toward the dark blood divine shaman in the distance without hesitation. "Old bastard, whoever escapes this time is a coward." Behind Lin Sun, a group of terrifying creatures followed him, as if they were afraid of pulling away from the lamp of no blame in Lin Sun's hand. Seeing this, the dark blood divine shaman directly broke down. He let out a loud cry, and he grabbed dark spirit Zhen and light fucking as he fled frantically. He looked like a frightened stray dog. Seeing this, Little Silver almost laughed out loud. Was this really a true saint? This was simply too embarrassing. Lin Sun chased with all his might, but without the help of the wings of the burning god, there was no way he could compare to a true saint who could control space. In the end, he still couldn't catch up. The group of terrifying creatures just followed behind Lin Sun, and from the beginning to the end, they had no intention of helping him. This made Lin Sun feel helpless. This was normal. A group of fellows guided by the lamp of no blame didn't even have consciousness, so how could they listen to his orders? But even so, Lin Sun was already very satisfied. At the very least, after leaving the big abyss, these terrifying creatures didn't do anything unusual. As for the dark blood divine shaman's escape, although Lin Sun was unwilling, he could only accept it. This is the mulberry forest, and that old fellow has suffered such serious injuries. He's bound to run into a lot of dangers. Lin Sun thought about it and finally shook his head. He stopped thinking about it and took out the golden jade pendant, then continued on his way. In his left hand, he held the lamp of no blame firmly. After passing through the narrow path on the cliff, It didn't take long before his eyes widened, and a misty mountain and river appeared. With a group of terrifying creatures following behind him, Lin Sun naturally had nothing to fear. He strode forward according to the directions of the golden jade pendant. For a moment, a strange scene appeared in the misty mountain and river. Lin Sun moved forward, and terrifying creatures followed behind him one after another, like loyal bodyguards. It was a majestic and spectacular sight. In the end, Lin Sun handed the lamp of no blame to Little Silver, and as he moved forward, he operated the law of immortality to heal his injuries. His speed wasn't fast, but it was already much faster than at the beginning. The reason was that Lin Sun really had nothing to fear now. He didn't fear any danger, and he couldn't wait for some danger to appear, so he could test the strength of the terrifying creatures behind him. It wasn't that he didn't encounter some terrifying things along the way. For example, in the misty mountain and river, some terrifying creatures swept out from time to time. There were ferocious birds, beasts, and demons. All of them had extremely powerful auras. But before they could get close, these creatures seemed to sense that something was wrong, and they fled with a bang, fleeing faster than anyone else. There were even some powerful creatures suspected to be in the Saint Realm who spied on Lin Sun from afar. It was just that when they saw the group of terrifying creatures around Lin Sun, these spying gazes disappeared completely at once. Legend had it that when the great emperor went out, all living beings would avoid him. Chapter 1471. In the depths of the mulberry forest, an ancient palace stood between heaven and earth, exuding a magnificent and immortal aura. 9,999 bluestone steps, like a ladder of the great Tao, extended from the ground to the gate of the ancient palace. In the sky, an auspicious rain of light fell, making the palace look like the residence of a deity. However, at this moment, a fierce battle had broken out in front of the stone steps. Boom! The terrifying laws of the great Tao, like a divine rainbow, roared incessantly and shook the 9 heavens. Zhao Yuanji, the Empress, Zhao Tailai, the Dean of Green Deer Academy, and a group of people were being attacked from all directions. Their opponents included the experts of the Voodoo Barbarian camp led by Wu Jiuchong, and the experts of the Alliance of 10,000 Races led by Zhu Tianxing. There was also a group of terrifying creatures that lived in hibernation in the mulberry forest. They were like a flood dragon that was as green as jade, and a bronze ant that was as large as a calf. Each of them had the terrifying combat strength of a quasi-emperor. Or rather, without the strength of a quasi-emperor, they would not be able to participate in this earth-shattering battle. In the battle, the Empress' pretty face was pale, and she coughed up a mouthful of blood, her slender figure trembling slightly. In the distance, Wu Jiuchong's expression was cold. "Zhao Yuanji, are you still going to resist? Your woman is about to die." His voice was like a clap of thunder, causing the void to explode. Wu Jiuchong was dressed in animal skin clothes, his beard and hair were scrawled, and his body was bronze in color. Every inch of his skin was branded with mysterious great Tao markings, and his aura was terrifying. He held a white bone spear, and his attacks were fierce. Any random attack had the terrifying power to destroy the universe and shake the world. He was the one who had injured the Empress earlier. "Humph, it's not certain who will die yet." The Empress snorted coldly. "Ridiculous, you still don't know when to retreat at this time. Then I'll fulfill your wish." On the other side, Zhu Tianxing charged over. He was dressed in a green robe, and his appearance was elegant and handsome like a young man, but his eyes were surging with an incomparably terrifying divine light. As he strode forward, the void collapsed and cracked, and the power of laws condensed into green lotuses that covered his body, making him look as elegant as an immortal. However, his attacks were extremely terrifying. Every strike of his caused a rain of light to pour down, and they transformed into illusory 1,000-foot-long saber chi that slashed down densely. That kind of attack could easily kill any sage. Zhao Tailai tried his best to resist, but the impact made his blood and chi churn. He let out a muffled groan, and his face alternated between green and white. "Don't you feel ashamed?" The headmaster of Green Deer School, who was nearby, rushed over to help. His face was ashen, and he let out a long roar. His robe fluttered in the wind, and his skinny figure exuded a majestic aura. "It's all for the sake of this great opportunity. What's there to be embarrassed about? This time, no matter what, Zhao Yuanji must die." Wu Jiucheng's expression was cold. While they were talking, they were fighting fiercely. They surrounded Zhao Yuanji, Goddess Empress, and the others. "Cut the crap and kill him," the green flood dragon said coldly. Its body grew to more than 10 feet long, like the legendary azure dragon. A casual attack could sink mountains and rivers, and shatter the land. It was extremely terrifying. On the other side, the calf-sized bronze ant waved its blade-like forelimbs. It did not say a word, but its attacks were the fiercest and most ruthless. "A bunch of despicable things. You want to become emperors? Wishful thinking." Zhao Tailai cursed angrily. In his heart, he was extremely anxious. They were all injured and in a precarious situation. If this continued, it was very likely that the entire army would be annihilated here. "Tailai, there's no need to talk nonsense with them. Fight. Even if we die in the end, we have to drag a few of them down with us." Zhao Yuanji's purple robe fluttered in the wind. His expression was calm, and his whole body exuded a powerful aura that shook the heavens. He took out a golden square jade seal, which emitted a power that could suppress the world and pacify the 10 directions. His attacks were heavy, calm, and did not seem ferocious. However, he alone blocked the attacks of multiple quasi-emperors. Wu Jiucheng, Go Tianxing, and the others felt a chill in their hearts when they heard Zhao Yuanji's words. Their expressions changed slightly, and then they snorted coldly. Their attacks also became more and more terrifying. This time, they had to kill Zhao Yuanji no matter what. Rumble. The battle became more and more terrifying. There was no light from the sun or moon, and the heavens and earth were dark. The terrifying power of the great Tao was like the Milky Way, sweeping across the battlefield. It was fortunate that a battle of this level had occurred near the ancient palace. If it had occurred outside, the destructive consequences would have been unimaginable. After all, quasi-emperors were above saint kings. Such a terrifying figure could destroy mountains and rivers with a flick of a finger, and shake the heavens and earth. One person could flatten a domain. And now, a group of quasi-emperors was fighting. It was not an exaggeration to say that even if a saint or great saint appeared here, once they were swept by the aftershocks of the battle, they would have no chance of survival. As for saint kings, they would also be seriously injured and forced to retreat. Puff. Before long, even with Zhao Yuanji's tyrannical strength, he could not help but cough up blood, and his clothes were dyed red. However, his expression was still calm. Only in his heart, he could not help but sigh softly. At first, when they arrived here, there was no conflict with the other experts, but when they were about to climb the stairs to enter the palace, an accident occurred. At that time, he tried to use his own power of the great Tao to communicate with the ancient palace, which hid a great opportunity. Who would have thought that it would actually cause a shocking phenomenon? This ancient palace, the sound of the bell rumbled, stirring the 9 heavens and 10 earths, emitting a fluctuation of aura, which actually formed a mysterious harmony with his body. This surprised Zhao Yuanji, and he found it hard to believe. His heart was excited, and he realized that he was very likely to win this great opportunity. But it was also because of this that it aroused the hostility and killing intent of the other experts. Whether it was the voodoo barbarian camp represented by Wu Jiucheng, or the alliance of 10,000 races represented by Go Tianxing, or even the terrifying creatures that were hibernating in the mulberry forest, they all pointed their spears at Zhao Yuanji and the others at the first instance. It was true that Zhao Yuanji had caused this phenomenon, but it was also because of this phenomenon that this group of people was in danger. No matter who it was naturally impossible for them to allow this great opportunity to fall into Zhao Yuanji's hands. So, they hadn't even entered the ancient palace when the battle erupted immediately. Fortune or misfortune, even Zhao Yuanji was unable to predict this. Up until now, Zhao Yuanji didn't have extravagant hopes of obtaining this great opportunity, and he decided in his heart that even if he died in battle, he would kill to his heart's content and drag a few of them down with him. The only thing he felt regretful about was that because of him, the Empress, Zhao Tailai, and the Dean of Azure Deer Academy had been implicated and had to suffer misfortune with him. This caused Zhao Yuanji to be unable to help but feel extremely guilty. Yuanji, there's no need to feel guilty. We've already disregarded life and death when we came here. Since the situation has already come to this, why don't we fight to our heart's content and kill until the heavens and the earth are overturned? The Empress spoke as if she'd seen through Zhao Yuanji's thoughts. Ha ha ha, of course! Zhao Tailai roared with laughter. Of course! The Dean of Azure Deer Academy roared with laughter. Fight! At this moment, their fighting spirit soared. Zhao Yuanji also laughed, and madness flashed in his eyes as he said, "Then let's go all out. It's been so many years since our empire has fought to our heart's content in a dormant manner." He was completely released and no longer had any scruples or worries. Whether it was Zhao Yuanji, the Empress, or the others, they all knew that it was a dead end before them. Even if they could kill all the experts before them, it would be useless, because there were terrifying beings watching the battle coldly in the darkness in the distance. If these fellows who seemed to be staying out of the battle discovered that they had killed a way out, how could they possibly stand idly by and watch? When they knew that they were going to die, they had let go of everything and were no longer afraid of death. Quick, we must use our full strength. At this moment, the expressions of Wu Jiuchong, Go Tianxing, and the other quasi-emperors turned solemn and did not dare to be careless. As quasi-emperors, they knew better than anyone how terrifying a quasi-emperor's counterattack before death was when he was fighting with his life on the line. Moreover, there was more than one quasi-emperor who was fighting with his life on the line. The terrifying beings watching coldly from afar were also agitated at this moment. They realized that this unprecedented battle was about to enter the stage where life and death would be decided. Bang! Not long after, the huge bronze ant was sent flying by Zhao Yuanji's palm strike, and a palm print was left on its body as it cried out in pain. But at the same time, Zhao Yuanji was also injured by the joint attack of the other experts. His body staggered and blood dripped from his lips. "All of you despicable things, go to hell." On the other side, Zhao Tailai was like a crazed demon. His hair was disheveled and his body was riddled with injuries. Blood flowed continuously and he looked extremely horrifying. But he was completely unaware of this and continued to fight with his life on the line. The Empress and the Dean of Green Deer Academy were the same. They were constantly injured in the battle, but none of them flinched or gave way. The tragic battle caused the heavens and earth to wail. It was a ghastly and shocking sight. However, in this desperate battle, Wu Jiuchong and many other quasi-emperors were also injured. This made them furious and their expressions darkened as they became extremely vigilant. They were afraid that the counterattack of Zhao Yuanji and the others before death would land on them. Even they were extremely afraid of the consequences. "Yuanji, I have to go first," the Empress said suddenly. Suddenly the Empress spoke. Her countenance was snow-white while her body swayed, and her plain clothes were completely dyed red with blood. Zhao Yuanji's body stiffened and an unspeakable anger surged in his heart. His eyes almost popping out of his sockets, he suddenly flashed in front of the Empress and said, "If you want to go, let's go together." "Yes, let's go together." Zhao Tailai's demeanor was deranged as he let out a beast-like roar. His expression was resolute and his eyes were bloodshot. The Dean of Green Deer Academy smiled faintly and said, "How fortunate it is to be able to die with you?" At this moment, They looked at each other and burst into laughter that shook the 9 heavens. Wu Jiuchong and the others looked cold, and their attacks became more and more terrifying. They did not hold back at all. Everyone knew that the most terrible thing was the battle before life and death. Although they despised Zhao Yuanji and the others for overestimating themselves, they did not dare to be careless. But at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in the distance. "Seniors, I, Lin Sun, will help you fight." Chapter 1472. The crowd of quasi-emperors could not remain calm. The combat strength displayed by those ferocious creatures was not inferior to any quasi-emperor at all. In fact, they were even stronger than any quasi-emperor. The snow-winged mystic bird was a ferocious one. It was a natural variant that had proven itself in ancient times. But it was sent flying by the white-bone immortal phoenix. The black giant ape was even more powerful, and its combat power was even more ferocious. When it was a quasi-emperor, it had slaughtered countless strong enemies. But even it was so shocked that it retreated without a fight. These wandering souls have been hibernating in the abyss of calamity, suppressed by the forbidden power. Why did they appear today? Someone muttered. "It's the power of that lamp." Someone seemed to have sensed it and looked at the lamp of no blame in Lin Sun's hand with a burning gaze. Instantly, everyone else reacted and looked over. Boom! But before they could gather their divine sense, it was shattered by an invisible force that blocked their probing. The reason was simple. The divine sense and gaze of these quasi-emperors could kill. If they were to land on Lin Sun, he would not be able to withstand the terrifying pressure and would die. Therefore, the heart that was riddled with holes immediately tried to save Lin Sun. This was not a conscious action, but an instinct that drove it to do so. If the lamp of no blame was their hope, then Lin Sun, who held the lamp of no blame, was their guide. Seeing this, the faces of the quasi-emperors changed again, their eyes flashing. Perhaps it was because the disparity in strength was too great, but Lin Sun did not notice anything amiss. His attention was focused on the battlefield not far away. "Kill!" Lin Sun roared and charged at Wu Jiuchong. Under normal circumstances, Wu Jiuchong could kill an ant like Lin Sun with a single thought. He would not even look at Lin Sun. But at this moment, his expression changed. Because as Lin Sun charged over, the 7 terrifying creatures also followed. Humph! Wu Jiuchong's expression was cold as he took out a bone sword and slashed at Lin Sun. Bang! The white bone giant, who was clad in broken armor, took out the broken sword on his back and slashed out with a simple slash. This slash seemed to carry the power of thousands of daos, causing the void to collapse and explode. The unparalleled sword chi directly broke the bone sword and turned it into powder. Furthermore, the sword chi's power did not diminish as it swept towards Wu Jiuchong, who was in the distance. Wu Jiuchong's expression changed slightly as he exerted force with his palm and suddenly pressed down, and only then was he able to disperse this wisp of sword chi, yet his body staggered from the impact. So powerful! Wu Jiuchong's heart trembled. A fellow who did not even have flesh and blood, and was only left with broken bones, actually possessed such astounding swordsmanship. This was unbelievable. Kill! Lin Sun didn't care at all and rushed into the battle. For a moment, furious roars rang out. Go Tianxing, the dark green flood dragon, the bronze ant, and the other quasi-emperor experts attacked without hesitation. That situation was definitely enough to make all living beings despair. But Lin Sun didn't suffer from the impact. Immediately, a group of horrible monsters behind him took action. Each of them emitted a shocking aura, like gods awakening from silence. For a time, the scene was completely chaotic. Originally, this battle was destined to end with the deaths of Zhao Yuanji and the others. However, at the final moment, a variable occurred. It was inconceivable that the variable came from an insignificant character that no quasi-emperor would take seriously. But it still happened. The terrifying creatures watching coldly from afar couldn't help but frown. On the battlefield, Wu Jiuchong, Go Tianxing and the others were livid with rage. They looked like they were about to cough up blood, and they were so depressed that they wanted to go crazy. Zhao Yuanji and the others all secretly heaved a sigh of relief, a trace of emotion rising between their brows. The feeling of surviving a disaster was, of course, extremely good. However, even they didn't expect that at this critical moment of life and death, the one who gave them a glimmer of hope would be Lin Sun, a young man who had not yet become a saint. How many quasi-emperors were there? In a battle like this, even saints, great saints, and even king saints would not be able to get involved. But Lin Sun had come, and he had brought a group of terrifying monsters with him to create chaos. Without too much emotion, Zhao Yuanji and the others also took advantage of this opportunity to launch a counterattack. Together with the terrifying monsters around Lin Sun, they attacked Wu Jiuchong and the others. Boom! The battle became more and more terrifying. However, the situation was completely different from before. Zhao Yuanji and the others had broken free from the trap, and there were signs of a comeback. As for Wu Jiuchong and the other quasi-emperors, no matter how unwilling and angry they were, they had no choice but to accept this reality at this moment. Lin Sun was originally a little nervous. After all, this was a battle between quasi-emperors. As far as the eye could see, there was a terrifying torrent of the Great Way. It was no exaggeration to say that even a wisp of fighting aura could completely wipe him out if it landed on him. But fortunately, all of this did not happen. The heart, which was riddled with holes, was already close to the top of his head. On the blood-stained surface, invisible waves of power circulated, dispersing all attacks for Lin Sun. As for the other 6 terrifying monsters, they were displaying their own methods to deal with Wu Jiuchong and the others. It was also at this time that Lin Sun deeply realized how strong these terrifying monsters were. The white-boned giant held the broken sword, unstoppable. His swordsmanship was upright and steady, but it had the power to crush everything. The bare branches of the charred tree swayed, a destructive aura flowing, like divine whips, causing the void to explode and the weather to change. The white-boned immortal phoenix danced in the air, emitting a gray-bone fire that incinerated the universe. The other monsters, such as the white-boned snake, white-boned fox, and white-boned old turtle, all showed amazing means. This was also the first time that Lin Sun had such a close distance, and so clearly felt how terrifying the power of a quasi-emperor was. He even felt that it was strenuous, that he couldn't understand, and that he couldn't understand. With his eyesight and perception, he could not capture the details of the battle, nor the mystery contained in those attacks. The reason was very simple. Compared with the terrifying existence of a quasi-emperor, his current strength suddenly seemed to be insufficient. He also finally understood why Zhao Xingye would so decisively give up the opportunity to enter the mulberry forest, saying that she could not reach such a great opportunity. Indeed, there was no difference between the saint realm and courting death. Whoosh! Suddenly, there was a terrible bombardment in the field. On the body of the dark green dragon, the white-boned immortal phoenix tore a bloody wound, scales and flesh scattered. Under the pain, the dark green dragon let out a roar, its body flashed in the void, and it directly moved out of the battlefield. Boom! Almost at the same time, the broken sword of the white-boned giant swept out and pierced the shoulder of a voodoo barbarian quasi-emperor, bringing out a string of scarlet blood. The latter screamed in pain and dodged repeatedly. Anyone could see that Wu Jiuchong and the others no longer had any advantage, and even showed signs of being suppressed. Retreat! Go Tianxing roared. Go! Wu Jiuchong also realized that the advantage was gone. If they continued to fight, the consequences would become worse and worse. Those terrifying monsters did not chase after Lin Sun, but just guarded by his side. They were terribly silent, without any emotional fluctuations. Zhao Yuanji and the others did not chase after them either. In the previous battle, they were all seriously injured, and it was not easy for them to hold on until now. Only Lin Sun felt a little regretful. He had seen that if these 7 terrifying monsters attacked with all their strength, they could definitely cause serious damage to Wu Jiuchong and the others. The scene was silent for a while, and only the cold wind was whistling between heaven and earth. Although Wu Jiuchong and the strong barbarians, Go Tianxing and the strong people of the Alliance of 10,000 Races, as well as the dark green dragon and other terrifying creatures had withdrawn, they did not completely give up and were still confronting each other in the distance. Their faces were gloomy, and they talked to each other secretly, obviously unwilling to give up. At the same time, Zhao Yuanji and the others also seized the time to heal their injuries. Ha ha ha, I really didn't expect that we would be saved by you this time. Zhao Tailai grinned. He was bathed in blood and covered with scars, but his spirit did not diminish. Zhao Yuanji, the Empress, and the Dean of Green Deer School also smiled and sighed with emotion. Yes, even they did not expect that Lin Sun would bring them such a big surprise. This was a life-saving grace. I'm just a fox borrowing the tiger's might. Lin Sun smiled bitterly. Zhao Yuanji glanced at the 7 terrifying monsters around Lin Sun and said secretly, "You've been into the abyss of calamity?" Lin Sun was stunned and immediately reacted. He told them about his experience in front of the White Bone Cableway. When they learned that Lin Sun was seriously injured by the dark blood holy sorcerer and fell into the abyss of calamity, Zhao Yuanji and the others all had a murderous look on their faces. And when they learned that the power of the Lamp of No Blame had turned Lin Sun's misfortune into a blessing and obtained the protection of these 7 terrifying monsters, even Zhao Yuanji and the others felt that it was unimaginable. This also made them realize that the Lamp of No Blame in Lin Sun's hands must be an incomparably mysterious treasure. During the conversation, Lin Sun also finally understood why Zhao Yuanji and the others were besieged, and he could not help but sigh in his heart. In the past, he had also had a similar experience. Because of opportunities or because of hatred, he was regarded as a target and was besieged. However, this kind of thing happened to quasi-emperors like Zhao Yuanji and the others, which made Lin Sun feel a little unreal. Only then did he realize that not only himself, but even quasi-emperors, could be besieged. Oh no, they seem to have reached an agreement with those guys who were watching from the sidelines, and they want to attack together. Suddenly, the Dean of Green Deer School frowned, and his eyes were frightening as he looked into the distance. He saw that those terrifying creatures who had been watching from the sidelines walked out one after another and approached them. There was a mysterious bird with snow-white wings, a giant black ape, a demonic flower whose entire body was fiery red and emitted sword chi. Each and every one of them had a terrifying aura, and Wu Jiuchong and Go Tianxing both looked relieved, and there was a smile on their faces. Obviously, they had convinced those terrifying creatures to join forces with them. Zhao Yuanji, do you see that? No matter who comes today, you will definitely die this time. Wu Jiuchong's voice was cold and callous. In this fight for a great opportunity, all the Taoist friends present will not allow an accident like you to exist. His voice rumbled and resounded between heaven and earth. The terrifying monsters beside Lin Sun were still silent, as if they were completely unconcerned about all this. And the faces of Zhao Yuanji and the others all darkened. These guys still did not give up. Chapter 1473. Lin Sun watched all this coldly. Because Zhao Yuanji's aura had a unique resonance with the ancient palace, he became the target of public criticism. Whether it was the voodoo barbarian camp, the alliance of 10,000 races, or the terrifying creatures living in the mulberry forest, none could tolerate Zhao Yuanji entering the ancient palace alive. Therefore, the tragic battle between quasi-emperors broke out. At this moment, although Lin Sun's arrival gave Zhao Yuanji and the others a chance of survival, at the same time, it also aroused the vigilance of those terrifying creatures who had been watching coldly in the distance. In their view, with the addition of Lin Sun and the 7 fierce creatures, the strength of Zhao Yuanji and the others had skyrocketed. Once Zhao Yuanji chose to enter the palace at this moment, whether it was the voodoo barbarian camp, the alliance of 10,000 races, or the terrifying creatures living here, no one could compete with Zhao Yuanji and the others. This was a threat that no one could ignore. Because of this, at this moment, those terrifying creatures who had been watching on the sidelines could no longer bear it and chose to cooperate with Wu Jiuchong and the others to deal with Zhao Yuanji and the others. This was the reason for the scene before them. Lin Sun could see it, so could Zhao Yuanji and the others. Their hearts sank, realizing that the situation was more serious than before. The atmosphere was oppressive, and a storm was coming. One terrifying creature after another came out, like one threat after another. Lin Sun could not help but frown and clench the token given by Do So in his palm. Zhao Yuanji, I can give you a chance. As long as you withdraw, we will certainly not make things difficult for you. Wu Jiuchong's deep voice resounded throughout the whole place. To fight with a group of quasi-emperors, one had to pay a great price. If there was no certainty of winning, no one would risk their lives. In particular, Zhao Yuanji now had Lin Sun and the 7 extremely terrifying fierce creatures by his side. Yes, as long as you withdraw, we have no objection to other people joining in, Zhu Tianxing said in a clear voice. Zhu Tianxing spoke in a clear voice. He looked like a handsome young man, elegant and suave. Nonsense, do you really think that after forming a faction, you can point fingers at the world and order people around? Without waiting for Zhao Yuanji to speak, Lin Sun sneered. Bastard! How can a little thing like you have the right to speak? Wu Jiuchong's face darkened and he roared. Old bastard, do you dare to come out and fight? As Lin Sun stepped forward, the 7 terrifying monsters behind him moved together. This scene caused Wu Jiuchong's eyelids to twitch, and his face darkened. He was a quasi-emperor. In the past, if such an insignificant ant dared to jump in front of him, he would have slapped it to death. But now, however, he could only endure it sullenly. You only know how to rely on external forces. Be careful that your Dao heart is unstable, Wu Jiuchong said coldly. Hee. Lin Sun sneered. Look at you old bastards. Aren't you forming cliques and oppressing people with the power of others? You still have the face to say such words? Don't you feel shameless? Wu Jiuchong's eyes were filled with killing intent. When a quasi-emperor's killing intent was aroused, the power of heaven and earth would be drawn in. Boom. But before the force caused by the killing intent could oppress Lin, it was dissolved invisibly, which made Lin feel at ease. This made Wu Jiuchong so depressed that he almost coughed up blood. As a quasi-emperor, he could not do anything to an ant that he looked down on. This feeling was too torturous. Seeing this, Lin Sun could not help but laugh coldly, his face filled with disdain. In the past, he would not have dared to look down on a quasi-emperor. But now, he was not afraid. Not to mention the fact that he had 7 monsters by his side. He still had some trump cards in his hands, so he was not afraid of making a big deal out of this. Furthermore, the reason why he spoke before Zhao Yuanji was because he was worried that Zhao Yuanji would agree to withdraw from this fight. If that was the case, Lin Sun would not be able to accept it. This was called the feeling of injustice. They were all here for the great opportunity, so why should they be forced to withdraw? Humph. Young man, the forces around you are not enough to stop us. I advise you to shut your mouth. Otherwise, the first one to die will be someone like you. Suddenly, a demonic flower appeared in the air, its petals sparkling and translucent, and the rain of light that it emitted turned into billions of sword chi. Wu Jiuchong and the others were all shocked, obviously quite afraid of this demonic flower, but then they all revealed a look of joy. With this demonic flower, they had more confidence to kill Zhao Yuanji. At this time, Zhao Yuanji and the others also narrowed their eyes, their expressions solemn, clearly aware of the extremely terrifying means of this demonic flower. This is a 1,000-feather sword flower, an ancient species nurtured by the heavens and earth. It has been famous since ancient times, and it only needs an opportunity to step into the Emperor realm. Its combat strength is extremely terrifying, and it is one of the creatures in the mulberry forest that cannot be provoked. Zhao Tailai's voice sounded in Lin Sun's ears. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed, but he sneered. A shameless rotten flower dares to mock me as grass. Who gave you the courage? All the quasi-emperors were stunned, almost unable to believe their ears. Throughout the ages, even the quasi-emperors did not dare to slander the thousand-feather sword flower. But now, what did they hear? A young man who had not become a saint was scolding the thousand-feather sword flower. The scene was a little silent for a moment. The thousand-feather sword flower swayed, hundreds of millions of sword chi flowing around it, clanging as if it was angry, and a terrible killing intent of sword Tao surged to the ninth heaven. At the same time, the heart that was riddled with holes appeared over Lin Sun, sprinkling invisible power to protect him. Bang bang bang! In front of Lin Sun, the void was torn by the invisible pressure of a quasi-emperor, but the place where Lin Sun stood was calm. Everyone was shocked. Even the power of the thousand-feather sword flower was blocked. That broken heart, could it be that it came from a figure in the Emperor realm? Rotten flower! Lin Sun sneered. Surprisingly, the thousand-feather sword flower became calm, its voice cold and low. This time, you can't escape. Dong! Between heaven and earth, there was a sudden tremor, and a white bull with snow-white fur, bathed in a sacred luster, broke through the air. On the back of the white bull sat a child in colorful clothes, with a blood-red lotus leaf on his head. His face was young, but his eyes were filled with a fierce and terrifying aura, incomparably frightening. He rode the white bull to the field, glanced at the crowd, and said unhappily, "The great opportunity has come, but you are wasting time. What's more, don't you think it's beneath your dignity to quarrel with a little thing who hasn't reached the Tao?" A child on the back of the white bull reprimanded the quasi-emperors, but surprisingly, neither Wu Jiuchong nor the thousand-feather sword flower retorted, remaining silent. Zhao Yuanji's face changed slightly, and his whole body seemed to tense up. How could it be him? A haze appeared between the brows of the dean of Green Deer School. Ancestor Blood Lotus. This fellow is an extremely terrifying existence. His true form is a blood lotus that was born in this chaotic land, and he'd already awakened and attained the Tao countless years ago. He seems to be like a child, yet he's actually extremely bloodthirsty, and he kills without batting an eyelid and is cruel to the extreme. Zhao Tailai suppressed the palpitation in his heart, and transmitted his voice to Lin Sun. Even if I am not injured, I can only fight against Ancestor Blood Lotus if I join forces with my brother, but now, alas. In the end, he couldn't help sighing, his expression uncertain. A child in colorful clothes riding a white bull with a blood-red lotus leaf on his head turned out to be a powerful and bloody old demon, which surprised Lin Sun a little. "Don't talk nonsense, let's start fighting. Let's go together and destroy them." On the white bull, the child crossed his arms over his chest, his eyes cold. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the field was tense. As these words fell, thousand-feather sword flower, Wu Jiuchong, Go Tianxing, and nearly 20 other quasi-emperors all revealed cold killing intent. Boom! In the sky, the wind and clouds changed color, and all directions shook. This piece of heaven and earth seemed to be unable to withstand the terrifying killing intent of the quasi-emperors, wailing incessantly. There were also all kinds of strange phenomena emerging between heaven and earth. There were bursts of thunder and lightning, flowing wind and fire, and stars falling. Mountains and rivers were burning. Just that scene alone was like the arrival of doomsday. "Forget it, I'll withdraw from this competition." Zhao Yuanji suddenly let out a long sigh, his expression indescribably lonely, and a deep sense of frustration welled up in his heart. He had been waiting for this great opportunity for too long, and had planned for too long. But in the end, he had to choose to give up before he saw this great opportunity. This feeling was too unreconciled. For this great opportunity, he would rather choose to withdraw, in order to save the lives of everyone. In the distance, Wu Jiuchong and the others couldn't help sneering. This was the general trend. Zhao Yuanji had no choice but to bow his head. If you had known this earlier, why did you have to make such a fuss just now? Go Tianxing said slowly, his words with a hint of mockery. Brother, why do you want to give up? Zhao Tailai glared angrily. The dean of Green Deer School sighed, while the emperor and empress revealed a bitter expression. Lin Sun had originally planned to use the token given by Do So as soon as possible, and if he was really forced into a desperate situation where even the 7 monsters behind him couldn't protect him, he would definitely not hesitate to use his biggest trump card. But who would have thought that Zhao Yuanji would say that he wanted to give up? At this moment, looking at the faces of the quasi-emperors in the distance, looking at their confident attitudes, Lin Sun felt an indescribable sense of depression in his heart. You want to withdraw? Suddenly, the Blood Lotus ancestor, who was riding on the white bull, said coldly, It's very simple, you can end it yourself, and we won't argue with you anymore. His words caused the atmosphere to suddenly become tense again. Zhao Yuanji's face was gloomy, and his eyes were surging with divine light. He was obviously extremely angry, but he was trying his best to suppress it. No! The expressions of Zhao Tailai, the emperor and the dean of Green Deer School all changed, and they tried to dissuade him. Lin Sun was already gnashing his teeth in hatred. So what if he retreated? They would only take a yard when given an inch. A cold light flashed in his black eyes, and he was about to crush the token in his hand, but at this moment, a magnificent blood-red light suddenly surged from afar. The momentum was so shocking that all the quasi-emperors present could not help but look. Chapter 1474. The blood-red light that suddenly blotted out the sky and covered the earth was not gloomy at all. Instead, it gave off a magnificent, holy, and brilliant atmosphere. The white bull was agitated, its hooves trembling. Ancestor Blood Lotus frowned and patted its head to calm it down. The 1,000-feather sword swayed, its sword chi flowing ceaselessly as if it was afraid of it. Wu Jiuchong and the others were all palpitating. This aura was too terrifying. Here comes another one, Zhao Yuanji sighed in his heart, his expression gloomy. Zhao Tailai and the others all looked solemn, their eyebrows full of gloom that could not be erased. Only Lin Sun's eyes widened in surprise and shock. How could it be here? A blood-red moth fluttered in the blood-red sky. Its tiny body seemed as if it was carved from the most perfect blood jade in the world, and it was agile and pure. As it flapped its wings, the nearby space silently collapsed and sank into oblivion before transforming into a horrifying black hole. It looked small, but its aura was like that of a ruler, covering the universe and oppressing the universe. Lin Sun was in a trance. He had seen this blood-red moth when he first entered the mulberry forest. Lin Sun would not forget that the blood-red moth and the white cicada had a great battle over the divine tree of ice and snow to save him. Why are you here? Let me tell you, you don't need to intervene in this battle. We can end it by ourselves. On the white bull, the childlike ancestor Blood Lotus spoke coldly, revealing a trace of hostility towards the blood-red moth. Wu Jiuchong and the others were silent. The aura of this blood-red moth was too terrifying, making them, the quasi-emperors, feel oppressed and uncomfortable. I'm here to return a favor to an old friend. The blood-red moth fluttered in the air, its figure ethereal and bright. Its voice had a unique rhythm, appearing unrestrained and calm. Return a favor? Everyone could not help but be stunned. Immediately, whether it was Ancestor Blood Lotus or Wu Jiuchong, their faces darkened. In their vision, the blood-red moth had already appeared in front of Lin Sun. You're not going to protect that little thing, are you? Ancestor Blood Lotus's voice was frighteningly cold. Why not? The blood-red moth's voice was calm. Wu Jiuchong and the others were shocked. They didn't expect that the blood-colored moth would stand on Lin Sun's side after it appeared. This was a terrifying existence that could threaten the Blood Lotus ancestor. His presence would add another variable to the situation. Even Zhao Yuanji and the others were stunned. They were quasi-emperors who were very knowledgeable and experienced, but no matter how hard they racked their brains, they didn't expect that the scarlet moth, whose aura was enough to make them tremble, would show up and stand beside Lin Sun. To be honest, Lin Sun felt a little confused at this moment. He was completely caught off guard. "Do you really want to be our enemy? You should know how serious the consequences are." In the distance, the Blood Lotus ancestor's voice grew colder, as if he had been infuriated. "There's no harm in trying." The blood-colored moth appeared to be very calm. From the beginning to the end, it gave off a leisurely, calm, and carefree aura. Then it looked at Lin Sun. "If you believe me, give me the insignificant bow." Lin Sun was stunned and took out the bow without hesitation. When he came to the mulberry forest for the first time, the blood-colored moth had saved his life. Now it chose to stand on his side. He had no reason not to believe it. The blood-colored moth took a deep look at him and didn't say much. Buzz. The insignificant bow suddenly made a strange buzzing sound, which shook the sky. The bow made of white bones and skeletons was full of fierce chi, as if it was cheering excitedly and eager to drink blood. "Insignificant, I finally see you again." There was a trace of sadness in the voice of the blood-colored moth. Immediately, it flapped its wings and flew into the sky. Suddenly, it turned into a man in snow-white clothes with a bearing like an immortal. His blood-red hair was fluttering and his eyes were deep. At this moment, he was like a bloody overlord, standing in the sky, exuding an imposing manner. Buzz. The insignificant bow fell into his slender white palm, and the aura it emitted became more and more terrifying, making the nearby void burst with a roar. Lin Sun was shocked. In the past, the insignificant bow had never exerted such a terrible aura in his hands. Even in the hands of Zhao Xingye, its power was far less than this. "Whoever wants to fight, just come over." The blood-haired young man in white, who was transformed by the blood-colored moth, said indifferently. His words shocked all directions, making many Emperor-to-be's blood boil and their faces change. "Fei Lan, have you had enough?" Suddenly, Ancestor Blood Lotus got up from the back of the white bull, exuding a terrible killing intent, and the blood-colored lotus leaf on the top of his head was flowing with a strong bloody light. "I think he is determined to fight against us." Thousand Feathers Demonic Flower said faintly, "In my opinion, there is no need to talk nonsense. Let's fight." Buzz. Suddenly, the man in white, who was called Fei Lan, pulled up the insignificant bow, and a fierce spirit arrow burst out. Lin Sun felt a stabbing pain in front of his eyes and couldn't see clearly at all. He only heard a deafening roar, as well as a shocked and furious shout. When his vision recovered, he saw a petal of Thousand Feathers demonic flower in the distance was pierced and was about to wither, and Wu Jiuchong and other Emperor-to-be all looked gloomy and their eyes were full of fear. Obviously, Thousand Feathers' demonic flower was injured by just one arrow. This was incredible. Zhao Yuanji and others around him were all shocked. They all saw the scene just now clearly. An arrow shot through the air, fast to the extreme, vicious to the extreme. Although Thousand Feathers' demonic flower tried its best to resolve it, it was still stabbed. "Fight? Believe it or not, I will kill you first." High in the sky, Fei Lan, the white-robed man, said indifferently, holding the insignificant bow in his hand. His momentum was overwhelming and incomparable. It should be known that he was facing a group of Emperor-to-be, but he didn't seem to be afraid at all. His peerless style made Lin Sun's mood surge. At this point, Ancestor Blood Lotus, Wu Jiuchong and others were completely sure that Fei Lan was determined to help Lin Sun. This made all of them feel tricky. If they started a war, the outcome would be a little uncertain. After all, in addition to Fei Lan, There were the 7 terrifying monsters around Lin Sun, as well as Zhao Yuanji and others. These people were not to be trifled with. Damn it! Zhu Tianxing gritted his teeth, feeling depressed. Originally, there were not so many variables at all. They were only a hair's breadth away from killing Zhao Yuanji. But with the arrival of Lin Sun, who they regarded as an ant, everything had changed. First, Zhao Yuanji and others had escaped. Then, even Fei Lan stood up and wanted to be their enemy. The situation was now completely out of their control. It had become extremely grim and terrible. How could Zhu Tianxing not hate? And Lin Sun had been regarded as the culprit. It was because of his appearance that Zhao Yuanji and others had escaped. It was also because of his protection that Fei Lan had appeared. Not only Zhu Tianxing, but Wu Jiuchong and other emperor-to-be also looked very gloomy. They hated Lin Sun, who had disrupted the situation, to the bone. What made them most depressed was that Lin Sun was merely a young man who had not become a martial saint. In the past, they could not even be bothered to look at him. But it was this fellow who had made them, the emperor-to-be, very passive. They felt very aggrieved and even had the urge to vomit blood. Clang! Just at this oppressive moment when swords were drawn and a fight could break out at any moment, suddenly, the sound of a bell rang out from the grand and ancient palace behind them. That sound seemed to resound in everyone's heart, sacred and solemn. At the same time, the tightly shut doors of the palace slowly opened and endless light of the way shot out from the doors. This expanse of the heavens and the earth was filled with a peaceful aura, and strands of wispy sounds that were like the sound of nature curled up and reverberated through the heavens and the earth. At this moment, everyone, be it friend or foe, was shocked. Was it finally time to unveil the mysterious veil of this great creation? Whoosh! Rays of divine rainbows of the Great Way appeared on the 9,999 steps and shot up into the sky. Swoosh! Before Zhao Yuanji could react, his body was enveloped by a divine rainbow and he suddenly disappeared from where he stood. Many people were dumbfounded when they saw this scene. Then, the Blood Lotus ancestor, who was standing on the back of the white bull, roared, "Damn it! He was the first to be chosen to enter the 10,000 Tribulations Emperor Palace." His words made everyone recall that Zhao Yuanji had used his own aura to create a certain resonance with the aura of this palace. It was also because of this that they saw Zhao Yuanji as their enemy and could not tolerate his survival. But who would have thought that such a thing would happen? They did not even have time to stop it. All of a sudden, the faces of the Blood Lotus ancestor, Wu Jiuchong, and the others turned extremely ugly. Lin Sun, Zhao Tailai, and the others looked at each other and were pleasantly surprised. This was indeed too unexpected. A bell rang and the ancient 10,000 Tribulations Emperor Palace seemed to awaken from its silence. Zhao Yuanji, who was originally trapped here, was the first to be chosen and moved away. No one had expected this. However, before they could celebrate too early, they saw streaks of divine rainbows sweep out from the stone steps and cover the figures of the quasi-emperors. Then, these quasi-emperors all disappeared. The Blood Lotus ancestor, Thousand Feather Sword Flower, Wu Jiuchong, Go Tianxing, and the other terrifying beings were all gone. "Wait for me to return your treasures." Even Fei Lan, who was standing high in the void, only had time to utter a word to Lin Sun before he disappeared. Before Lin Sun could react, Zhao Tailai, the Empress, and the Dean of Green Deer School were also taken away by the divine light of the Great Path. Whoosh! 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 There were still many terrifying beings lurking in the distance. When they saw this scene, they all teleported over as fast as they could. As soon as they got close, they were taken away by the divine light of the Great Path and disappeared into thin air. In just a moment, Lin Sun was the only one left in front of this magnificent ancient palace. Accompanying him was a group of terrifying beings. They had been silent all this time. Although they did not have the combat strength of a quasi-emperor, the strange thing was that they were not chosen. Lin Sun was stunned. Originally, it was a stalemate with turbulent undercurrents and a state of mutual hostility, but just like that, it silently collapsed and disappeared. He could not even react. After a while, Lin Sun looked up at the majestic ancient palace, and could not help but smile bitterly. In the end, all those old guys had gone in, but he was not chosen and stayed where he was. Wasn't this too unfair? Chapter 1475. Heaven and earth returned to silence, an auspicious and sacred atmosphere filled the air. The ancient emperor palace of 10,000 tribulations stood tall, exuding a magnificent atmosphere. Looking at this scene from a distance, the barefoot young man in linen clothes turned his eyes to Lin Sun standing in front of the steps of the emperor palace of 10,000 tribulations. He smiled and said, "You saw everything that happened just now. There are 50 great Daos and 49 heavenly evolutions. Now that one of them has escaped, this little fellow who is ranked as the 50th true disciple of Mount Innerheart is a variable." Next to him, the white-clothed beautiful girl who was transformed by a white cicada looked very impatient. "Those guys have already gone in, why are you still nagging? Even if that young man is a variable, what does it have to do with us?" The golden cicada young man sighed. "Well, you go." The white cicada girl said, "You don't want to go? I want to talk to that little friend first." The golden cicada young man looked at Lin Sun in the distance. "So long-winded." The white cicada girl frowned, and her figure flashed and disappeared. The golden cicada young man smiled and didn't take it seriously. In front of the steps, Lin Sun sighed. It was conceivable how great this great opportunity was to make a group of quasi-emperors so crazy. It was very likely to be related to becoming an emperor. With his cultivation, he hadn't become a saint yet. Even if he entered the emperor palace of 10,000 tribulations, he was doomed to not get such an opportunity. Don't sigh, it's just an opportunity. As long as the time is right, there will be opportunities to fight for it. Suddenly, a clear and gentle voice sounded in his ear. Lin Sun looked up and saw a barefoot young man in linen clothes standing beside him. What was inconceivable was that the 7 ferocious beasts following behind him did not react at all. Lin Sun's eyelids twitched, and he carefully looked at the young man beside him. The voice gave him a familiar feeling. "Have you forgotten that we had a chat in the past?" The golden cicada young man smiled, his eyes gentle, and there was no trace of eye-catching aura around him. "It's you." Lin Sun suddenly came to his senses, and a touch of surprise appeared between his eyebrows. "If I'm not mistaken, you are also here for this great opportunity?" The golden cicada youth smiled and said, "Yes and no. I'm here because I'm about to leave. I'm not here to fight for a fortuitous encounter." As he spoke, he casually sat on the first step and said, "I'm truly happy to be able to meet you again before I leave. This is fate, it's too wonderful for words." Lin Sun didn't know what this guy wanted to do for a while, but he didn't want to think too much about it. He said perfunctorily, "You said the same words in those years." The young man with the golden cicada smiled and said, "Are you worried about your friends? I don't think that's necessary. This great opportunity has already been decided. No matter who comes, it can't be forced." Lin raised his eyebrows. "Really?" The golden cicada youth shrugged. "I never lie. This palace was left behind by the 1,000 Tribulations Emperor. Originally, he wanted to establish an orthodoxy in the source of chaos and pass down his cultivation here. However, due to the sudden arrival of a great battle, he had no choice but to hastily set up a trap before his death. With his death as the price, he left behind this opportunity to become a martial monarch. Myriad Tribulation Great Emperor. Hearing this, Lin Sun's heart shook fiercely as he remembered something. The bloodthirsty battlefield in the night was a world formed by the corpses of martial monarchs. It was mysterious, vast, and terrifying like a forbidden place. The mysterious woman once said that the world of night would disappear completely and a great opportunity would appear. Now, standing in front of the Thousand Tribulations Emperor Palace and listening to the words of the Golden Cicada Youth, Lin Sun had a bold conjecture. Could the corpses of martial monarchs that turned into the world of night be left behind by the fallen Thousand Tribulations Emperor? The Thousand Tribulations Emperor was a peerless genius. With a humble body, he defied the heavens and went through the hardships of thousands of tribulations to finally become a martial monarch. Unfortunately, the Golden Cicada Youth sighed. The path he pursued was too taboo, so when he was about to establish an orthodoxy and preach to the world, he met with a disaster. Back then, I brought Abai here to find out the truth behind the myriad tribulations' great emperor's death. If I don't find out what happened to the myriad tribulations' great emperor, then I might end up like him in the future. If that's the case, I won't be able to accept it. Speaking of this, he looked at Lin Sun and said with a smile, I told you that I once made a great wish to seek a way that could make all living beings in the world become saints. This road is not easy to walk. There was a trace of emotion in his voice. For countless years, he had been dormant here, calculating, pondering, sensing, and experiencing up until now. He'd finally faintly seen a trace of hope before the arrival of this great era, so how could he not sigh with emotion? The pursuit of the Great Way always needed to endure loneliness and the torment of loneliness in the passage of time. Senior, I'm afraid you're playing the lute to a cow by telling me this. Lin Sun was stunned for a moment and then laughed at himself. He hadn't become a saint yet, so he naturally couldn't understand the difficulties and dangers of the Emperor realm. You don't understand now, but you will understand in the future. When I talked to you about the saint realm, you didn't understand it either. Look at you now, you are not far from the saint realm. The Golden Cicada Youth's words were casual, gentle, and clear, with a kind of power that calmed people's mind. Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh when he thought of the past. Indeed, you said that a saint without a saint is a true saint, and a Tao without a Tao is a Tao, which made me understand that if I want to reach the top, I must seek an unprecedented way. The Golden Cicada Youth nodded. The divine way is like the backbone of a man, which supports the torso. It can reach the sky and the earth, and it has the means to preach and educate all living beings. If you don't become a true saint, you can't talk about the divine way, and it's even more useless to want to become an emperor in the future. After thinking about it, the Golden Cicada Youth said, The 5 realms of cultivation temper the foundation of cultivation. In these 5 realms, a practitioner leaps from an ordinary person to a Taoist, and begins to understand the truth of heaven and earth, and see the wonders of the Tao. The path towards immortality establishes the foundation of the Tao. The soul is like a lamp that cannot be extinguished and exists eternally. Only by possessing the ability to attain immortality would one be able to resist the slaughter of time and possess even more time and opportunities to seek the grand Tao that is even higher. As for the saint realm, you have the real power of proving the Tao, and the way you seek for the Tao has begun to touch the essential rules of the Tao of heaven and earth. Only by mastering the essential rules of the Tao of heaven and earth can you seek the eternal road to the Emperor realm. This is the known way of cultivation since ancient times. But you also know that it's easy to know but difficult to do. Embarking on the road of seeking is equivalent to embarking on the road of no return. You can't make a wrong step. Speaking of this, the Golden Cicada Youth was silent for a moment, and then he said, But no one can give a clear answer to what is right and what is wrong. That's why the path to seek the Grand Tao seems to be so dangerous and difficult. Everyone thinks that the path they've taken is correct, but when they notice that there's no path ahead, they'll understand that the path they've been seeking in the past was a wrong path. Back then, the Thousand Tribulations' great emperor violated some sort of taboo in his pursuit of the Tao, so he suffered a calamity. Perhaps his Tao was correct, but in my opinion, his Tao was a wrong path. Hearing this, Lin suddenly asked, Since it is wrong, Why do you still hide here all these years to explore the truth of the death of the great Emperor of Calamity? It's very simple. I want to know where he went wrong. The golden cicada youth said frankly. Do you know now? It's hard to say. The golden cicada youth thought for a moment and said, but I will try. At this point, the golden cicada youth suddenly said, since you asked me, let me ask you, have you ever doubted whether the road you seek is right or wrong? Lin Sun smiled and said, I have before. He recalled the scenes he had experienced in the 9th test of Green Cloud Path, samsara. After more than 20 years of meditation and contemplation in that samsara, he finally understood the true meaning of one thing. When the false is true, the true is false. When there is nothing, there is nothing. If I am true, then the Tao is true. Therefore, the golden cicada youth's question naturally wouldn't make him feel confused. Looking at Lin Sun's clear and calm eyes, the golden cicada youth couldn't help but clap his hands and laugh. Good, good, no wonder you dare to cultivate the 3 paths at the same time. Turns out that you have already seen through them. He stood up from the stone steps and said, you must come here to pass the forbidden Tao test, and even to become a sage. Lin Sun was moved and said, Senior, please give me some advice. I can't give you any pointers. Our paths towards the Tao are different, said Yi Shiwen. The golden cicada youth said, you might as well go to the Emperor Palace of Calamity by yourself. Lin Sun immediately understood that he might not be able to reach the great opportunity to become an emperor, but in the Emperor Palace of Calamity, there was an opportunity for him to pass the test. Immediately, he frowned, but I haven't been chosen. The golden cicada youth smiled, and pointed to the 9,999 steps, saying, the road is in front of you, why not go? Lin Sun came to his senses and laughed at himself. It's just like this. My young friend, please borrow this lamp. The golden cicada youth looked at the lamp of no blame. Lin Sun handed it over. The golden cicada youth smiled and gently flicked his fingertip. The wick suddenly shone brightly, and the dim shadow of the lamp became as dazzling as the sun. Vaguely, there was a vague and distorted door in the bright shadow of the lamp. Go. You were oppressed by the taboo for guarding the Emperor Palace of Calamity. Today, I will use this treasure to guide you back. The golden cicada youth looked at the 7 fierce creatures nearby and said in a low voice, boom. First, the heart that was riddled with holes moved. In an instant, it transformed into an old man in a Taoist robe with hair as black as ink. Thank you, my fellow practitioner. At this moment, the old man in a Taoist robe obviously had some consciousness. After a while, he cupped his hands to the golden cicada youth. Then he looked at Lin Sun with a trace of gratitude and said, my young friend, please accept this thing. I will repay you for today's kindness in the future. After saying that, he stretched out his hand and a wisp of green light condensed into a jade plate. He handed it to Lin Sun with both hands. P.S. The golden fish has gone out and it will be updated automatically in the future. Please don't forget to vote for it. When the annual meeting comes back, the golden fish will definitely burst out. Chapter 1476. The token was engraved with an ancient character, U in bird seal script. There was nothing special about it in his hand, but the young man with golden cicada showed a strange expression. He smiled and said nothing. Goodbye. The old man turned around and stepped into the depths of the bright light and shadow of the innocent lamp. This is an ancestor of the Yu family, an imperial family on the starry sky ancient path. His temperament is the most aloof and cold. He is a good friend of the emperor of innumerable tribulations. If one day you are in trouble on the starry sky ancient path, you can take out this token. The young man with golden cicada couldn't help reminding Lin Sun. An imperial family, and it was from the starry sky ancient path. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and put away the token. Whoosh! The white bone fairy phoenix flew and turned into a beautiful woman with her hair tied up in a bun. She looked holy and aloof. However, she bowed slightly and said to Lin Sun and the young man in golden robe, "Thank you for your help. This is a feather of my clan. Please accept it." Whoosh! A piece of colorful and illusory feather appeared in the woman's palm. She handed it to Lin Sun. Lin Sun looked at the young man with golden cicada, who said with a smile, "You helped them get out of trouble. It's natural for them to repay you." Lin Sun put away the priceless feather of the immortal phoenix and said, "Thank you." It didn't take long for the woman to leave. You can probably tell that this woman comes from the bloodline of the immortal phoenix. In her clan, her seniority isn't considered high, but her cultivation base and foundation are second to none. Unfortunately, if she wasn't trapped in this place by that forbidden power, with her talent, it shouldn't be difficult for her to step into the martial emperor realm. The young man with golden cicada sighed. Next, the white bone giant with a broken sword on his back turned into a bearded man from the giant K clan. He gave Lin Sun a 7-inch cyan scabbard. The scorched tree turned into a beautiful woman with a hairpin and plain clothes. She was a Tao tree of fire. She gave Lin Sun a fiery red leaf. The white-boned fox turned into a cyan fox with 8 tails. Her face was soft and charming. She came from the 9 Orifices Fox clan and gave Lin Sun a string of glittering sapphire bells. White-boned snake turned into a middle-aged man with a ferocious face and a gloomy aura. He came from the dark-winged snake clan and gave Lin Sun a snow-white tusk. White-boned turtle turned into an honest short old man from the great void dragon turtle clan. He gave Lin Sun a white shell the size of a baby's palm. In the process, they thanked Lin Sun and the golden cicada youth one after another, and then walked into the bright light of the no-blame lamp one by one and disappeared. The young man with golden cicada stood beside him and introduced them to Lin from time to time. It was not until then that Lin Sun realized that almost none of the 7 horrible monsters following him along the way was simple. For example, the elder of the Yu clan was a martial emperor in name only. The others were also terrifying big shots from various clans. All those years ago, they'd protected the myriad tribulations emperor in the origin of chaos. However, they'd been implicated and suppressed by the forbidden energy. Their cultivations had been damaged, and that was why they'd become like this. The appearance of the no-blame lamp helped them resolve the suppression of the forbidden power and free themselves from the great abyss of innumerable tribulations. To them, the lamp of no blame was a hope that would allow them to return to where they came from. Otherwise, they, whose bodies had been destroyed by the forbidden power, could only be lost in the world like wandering ghosts. They would be neither human nor ghost, unable to awaken their consciousnesses. Take good care of the things they gave you. They will be useful in the future. The young man with golden cicada said, and returned the no-blame lamp to Lin Sun. The most important thing is to protect this lamp. It's the painstaking effort of a great emperor. Lin Sun thought of the skeleton boatman on the Styx River. Was that also an emperor realm expert? He put away the no-blame lamp carefully. He'd completely witnessed the miraculousness of this lamp, and he was very clearly aware of what sort of miraculous treasure it was. Let's go and have a look. The young man with golden cicada took the lead and stepped on the stone step. Lin Sun followed closely. There were 9,999 steps. As soon as he stepped on it, Lin Sun felt a strange vibration force spreading, which made his body tremble. Clatter, he silently circulated his body refinement cultivation, and only then was he able to resolve this strange vibrating force. The young man with golden cicada walked leisurely as if he was walking on the ground. Lin Sun withdrew his gaze and continued to follow. As he took a step, the higher he went, the stronger the strange vibrating power became. At the beginning, it was like a murmur. Although there was vibration force, it didn't affect Lin Sun at all. But soon, this trickle gradually turned into a surging wave, and the vibration force began to become stronger and stronger. Later on, the wave started to become turbulent, and it was as if a small stream had transformed into a great river. The raging waves beat against the shore, and the current was rapid and incomparably ferocious. But Lin Sun still couldn't do anything. In the process of climbing the steps, he just ran his body refining cultivation to become stronger and stronger, and then he resolved the vibration force. However, when he set foot on the 1,000th stone step, Lin Sun's expression became a little dignified. When he stepped forward, he seemed to be going against the rolling torrent. The terrible shock force oppressed him as if thousands of troops and horses were charging at the enemy line. The young man with golden cicada walking in front of him didn't look back, as if he was unaware of Lin's situation behind him. He looked very leisurely and calm, and his pace was very stable from beginning to end. Lin Sun took a deep breath and ran his body refining power to about 50%, so that he could keep up with the pace of the young man with golden cicada. When he set foot on the 2,000th step, Lin Sun's blood and qi seemed to be boiling and surging, and his whole body was bathed in the 9 pure Tao light. At this time, he had run his body refining power to the extreme to resolve and offset the vibration force spreading on the stone step. Lin Sun couldn't help feeling shocked. It should be known that he had reached the fulfillment of the 8th retribution of longevity in body refining, and he was a real top king. But he had to go all out when he just set foot on the 2,000th step, and there were still 7,999 steps in front of him. The meaning of this number was enough to make any strong man desperate. Even Lin Sun's expression was extremely solemn. In front of him, the young man with golden cicada was barefoot and dressed in linen, with a leisurely manner. He didn't intend to stop and wait for Lin Sun. Whoosh! Lin Sun took a deep breath, got rid of distractions, and continued to move forward. In the following time, he even had to run the fury of Yazi. Later, when the fury of Yazi was not enough, he ran the fighting saint method. When he set foot on the 300th stone step, Lin Sun had already exerted the full strength of the art of permanence and leakage. He seemed to be fighting with all his strength, and the sound of Tao was extremely dazzling. At this moment, Lin Sun finally felt tired. If it was in ordinary times, he wouldn't feel so difficult even if he met a fake sage. But now, he was just climbing the steps. "Do you want to take a break?" At this moment, the young man with golden cicada stopped and asked Lin Sun in a gentle voice. "No need." Lin Sun shook his head. The young man with golden cicada didn't insist and continued to move forward. Lin Sun gritted his teeth and followed step by step. Boom, boom, boom. The terrible shock force, like a landslide and a tsunami, smashed at Lin Sun. There was no way to hide or avoid it. If he wanted to move forward, he had to face it head-on. By the time he set foot on the 3,300th step, Lin Sun was already panting, with cold sweat on his forehead, and every inch of his muscles was trembling. But he didn't stop. The confrontation along the way aroused a fierce spirit in Lin Sun's heart. The most important thing was that the young man with golden cicada never stopped. Lin Sun didn't want to be left far behind by this guy. Even if he knew that his cultivation was far inferior to the young man, Lin Sun didn't think that his future achievements would be inferior to the young man. However, Lin Sun didn't know that as early as he set foot on the 3,000th step, the young man with golden cicada walking in front of him showed a trace of surprise. It seemed that he didn't expect that Lin Sun could go so far. Until Lin Sun set foot on the 3,300th step by step, the young man with golden cicada seemed to be very surprised, with a strange look in his eyes. He knew very well how incredible it was to be able to go to this step on the Taoist ladder arranged by the Emperor Realm on the way to immortality. Even for the top figures, it was rare for them to come this far like Lin Sun. The young man with golden cicada smiled silently and didn't say anything more. He continued to move forward as if he wanted to see how long Lin Sun could hold on. When he reached the 3,500th step, Lin Sun seemed to be carrying a holy mountain on his back, and his handsome face showed an extremely strenuous look. When he stepped on the 3,600th step, Lin Sun's face was distorted because of the strenuous effort, and the blue veins on his forehead stood out. When he stepped on the 3,700th step, his body shook with every step he took, as if he was about to collapse. When Lin Sun stepped on the 3,900th step, the young man with golden cicada stopped for the first time and said, "Do you want to take a break? You are on the verge of exhaustion. If you go on like this, you will hurt yourself and damage your cultivation." His voice was serious. After thinking for a while, he said, "You don't have to be so stubborn. It's already an incredible feat for you to be able to make it this far. In the past, I've never seen a peerless figure who could perform as well as you in this realm." At the end of his words, he turned his head and looked at Lin Sun. At this time, it's better to stop before going too far. Lin Sun was silent for a while and then shook his head. "No need." The young man with golden cicada was stunned. "You only practice body refining all the way. Isn't it to sharpen your physique? Now it's enough. If you continue to sharpen it, it's as bad as not doing enough." Lin Sun smiled and took a sudden step up to the next stone step. Then, like a dry riverbed ushering in a rainstorm, Lin Sun's aura began to rise steadily, becoming stronger and more blazing. The young man with golden cicada suddenly smiled with a strange look in his eyes. "I see." Chapter 1477. He had broken through the realm. The young man with golden cicada's eyesight could tell that Lin Sun's cultivation had entered the 9th retribution realm from the 8th retribution realm. One step and he had broken through the realm. Boom, around Lin Sun, the 9 pure lights flowed, sweeping away the discomfort and fatigue in his body. He was in high spirits and his aura was strong. The young man with golden cicada smiled and sighed, then turned around and continued to move forward. Behind him, Lin Sun also smiled and followed him. The 5,000th step, the 6,000th step, the 7,000th step, along the way, Lin Sun's mentality had completely changed. His cultivation of the 9th retribution realm had been constantly tempered by the repeated confrontations. This was, in fact, a huge gain. The most taboo for a newly promoted cultivation was the instability of the realm and the shaking of the foundation. The confrontation on the stone steps was like a whetstone, which not only stabilized Lin Sun's realm, but also mastered the transformed power of body refining in the shortest time to the point that he could use it freely. For those big shots, the great opportunity in the hall is a must-fight for the opportunity to become an emperor, but for me, the training in front of me is actually an opportunity. Lin Sun came to a realization. Indeed, he couldn't get that great opportunity. But at the same time, there was a suitable opportunity for him in front of the Emperor Palace of 10,000 tribulations. But soon, Lin Sun had no time to think about it. When he set foot on the 7,600th step, he felt the signs of difficulty again. Moreover, the power of the body refining had been consumed again in the previous confrontation and was about to be exhausted. This time, Lin Sun didn't insist. He quietly ran his qi refining cultivation, and his pace became steady again. Along the way, the young man with golden cicada didn't make a sound. Lin Sun didn't say anything more. He devoted himself to fighting against the increasingly terrifying vibration force. The higher he went, the more terrifying the vibration force was. Even if he ran his qi refining cultivation, it was still very difficult for Lin Sun. It was like at the beginning, his opponents were just ordinary people, and the higher he went, the stronger the opponents he met. Until now, he even felt that he was fighting against a group of fake sages. The pressure doubled. Without any hesitation, when he stepped onto the 8,200th step, he circulated his soul refinement cultivation to its fullest. However, in just 10 minutes, Lin Sun felt strenuous again. There were 9,990 steps in total. The higher he went, the stronger the shock was. Especially when he stepped on the 9,000th step, Lin Sun's body shook and he was almost shaken back. He gritted his teeth and prepared himself for battle with all his might. In the following time, Lin Sun's expression became more and more serious, and his steps became heavier and heavier. His whole body was like a burning furnace of chaos, shining to the extreme. 9100, 9200, 9300. In the end, his entire body was trembling while his bones emitted sounds of being unable to endure the heavy load. Moreover, the veins on his face had bulged up and warped. It was too difficult. This was more difficult than any battle Lin Sun had ever encountered, and his will was under unprecedented pressure. In fact, from the moment he set foot on the 9,000th step, the golden cicada youth had been ready to give Lin a hand when he couldn't hold on any longer. But up to now, Lin Sun had already set foot on the 9,700th step, and he still persisted. Every time he took a step, his body was shaking like a candle in the wind, which would fall down and go out at any time. However, he miraculously persevered every single time. His hurried breathing was like a bellows being pulled. Sweat flowed out of his body like a stream, and his face was already pale. Many times, the golden cicada youth wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. He almost couldn't help but help Lin Sun several times. But in the end, he didn't do so. Lin Sun was still persisting. Why should he give up at this time? The golden cicada youth suddenly thought of Calamity Emperor. In those days, Calamity Emperor went against the heaven and became an emperor after thousands of tribulations. How could he do it without great perseverance and willpower? But Lin Sun in front of him, at least in perseverance and willpower, was not inferior to Calamity Emperor at all, and even surpassed him. In ancient times, those who made great achievements not only had extraordinary talent, but also had indomitable will. Fangtsuan Mountain has added a great successor. The golden cicada youth sighed with emotion. Very embarrassed. Unprecedentedly embarrassed. For the first time since returning to the mortal world, Lin Sun almost couldn't hold on. This was not a battle. But it was more torturous and difficult than a battle. In the end, Lin Sun's body was numb, and his consciousness was blank. He supported himself with his unyielding willpower. All thoughts were gone. The sky, the earth, and the man, everything was empty. Moving forward had become an eternal instinct. The origin spirit vein in his chest had become boiling hot. It was like a blazing sun that was burning in his body, emitting dazzling and strange fluctuations. The original spiritual vein was trembling and buzzing, like a seed buried in the ground, showing signs of bursting out. Lin Sun didn't notice all this. The 9,900th step. The 9,990th step. Arriving here, the golden cicada youth was shocked. He hadn't had this kind of emotion for a long time. But at this time, he was touched by Lin Sun. With his knowledge and wisdom, he could infer most things in the world. But this time, even he didn't expect that Lin Sun could hold on until now. This was an accident. Accidents often shocked people. The golden cicada youth couldn't even remember when was the last time something like this had happened, and what had shocked and surprised him. Therefore, his mood was a little unsettled at this moment. I have been dormant and meditated for countless years. Now I am about to leave, but I got such an accident. This young man is really a variable. There was a trace of surprise between the golden cicada youth's eyebrows. There were 50 Tao and 49 heavenly evolutions, but one escaped. Fangtsuan Mountain hadn't chosen a disciple for many years, but in this life, it chose this young man, and the number of its disciples was 55. In this way, could it be that there was some sort of secret hidden in the darkness? What was more, it happened to be a great era, and the great era was full of variables. When a young man, like a variable, sought Tao in this great era where everything was possible, what kind of path could he take? At this moment, the golden cicada youth couldn't help but have an impulse to stay and see Lin Sun's future. But in the end, he held back. Because if he didn't leave this time, there would be no chance in the future, as he was thinking, he heard a flop. The golden cicada youth turned his head and saw Lin Sun take a step forward and fall down on the 9,999th step. This was the gate of the Emperor Palace of 10 tribulations. No matter how many nines there were, they would all return to one in the end. And among the 50 Tao, one escaped from the number of heavenly evolutions. At this moment, Lin Sun seemed to be sitting there miserably, but in the eyes of the golden cicada youth, he couldn't hide his surprise. Surprise, surprise. Strange, strange. The appearance of the golden cicada youth at this moment was like watching a miraculous accident, which puzzled him and made him feel an indescribable joy. After a long time, he gradually calmed down and said to himself, "Interesting, it turns out that I haven't seen through him before. It's rare, it's really rare." At this time, Lin Sun, who was sitting on the ground, didn't completely relax, nor did he fall asleep because of excessive fatigue and weakness. He didn't know where the strength came from. He gritted his teeth, moved his numb body with difficulty, and sat down cross-legged little by little. Then, he slowly closed his eyes. It was obvious that his face was pale and tired, but at this moment, he looked solemn and impressive. Chapter 1478. The golden cicada youth stared at Lin Sun. In the depths of his eyes, which were as clear as a baby's, infinite mysterious light was reflected, which seemed to be able to see through everything. But in merely a few breaths of time, he withdrew his gaze and revealed a startled expression. He could see that Lin Sun's cultivation had gained immeasurable benefits after being tempered by the power of 9,999 stone step. He also saw that although Lin Sun's strength was exhausted at the moment, he had awakened the talent in his bloodline under extreme tempering. But even he couldn't detect the aura of that kind of innate divine ability. This could only prove that the power of the talent awakened by Lin Sun was extraordinary. This was the reason why the golden cicada youth was stunned. The swallowing abyss. The talent mastered by the fierce guy named Xing and was the star-submerging skill. With one strike, he could destroy the stars and the moon and annihilate the vitality. It was extremely powerful. There was a trace of reminiscence in the eyes of the golden cicada youth. However, the talent awakened by Lin Sun seems to be completely different from that of Xing. It's interesting that the talent awakened by the same bloodline power is different. This kind of bloodline power is very rare. When the golden cicada youth was meditating, a strange and blazing wave appeared on Lin Sun, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. His originally blank consciousness suddenly felt as if he was wandering in a vast and long river, the waves rolling and surging endlessly. As for his consciousness, it drifted along with the wave. He saw many incredible scenes. Time passed, the 4 seasons changed, the longitude and latitude evolved, the rise and fall of history, all living beings experienced birth, old age, sickness and death, the world experienced vicissitudes of life. Mountains and rivers were destroyed and reborn in an orderly manner. In a trance, spring and autumn had passed. In a snap of fingers, a light year passed. It was as if he had experienced a bizarre and dazzling journey through the years. Boom! Immediately, everything burst into pieces. A corner of the vast river was swallowed by a big abyss, which suddenly produced an indescribable scene of collapse and turbulence. At this moment, Lin Sun's body produced a kind of instinct. A stream of destiny dark force, originally sealed in his sea of consciousness, gushed out and poured into his heart. The destiny dark energy was one of the rewards obtained after passing the test in the heaven accessing place. It had the magical power to stimulate one's talent and awaken the original power. At this moment, this force was completely swallowed by Lin's spiritual vein. Then, in Lin Sun's consciousness, he saw a peerless scene. In the vast river, a wisp of the aura of time was swallowed by the abyss. Time, it was the supreme order of the heavens, it was a power that even Emperor Realm experts could only sigh at. At this moment, a wisp of the aura of time was left behind in a large abyss. Lin Sun felt a sharp pain in his consciousness. Everything he saw and felt was like broken glass, turning into fragments and disappearing. Boom. After that, his consciousness returned to his body, and his entire body suddenly started trembling. His apertures, skin, meridians, sea of consciousness, internal organs. Every single area of his body was filled with a strand of strange and surging blazing energy. In the place of the heart vein, a section of the spiritual vein had undergone a complete transformation. It was as illusory as a touch of light, in which a strange Taoist pattern was floating. This Tao marking was too unique. It was shaped like a feather, and it was jade white and dazzling. It was suffused with strands of a mysterious and obscure aura, and it faintly seemed as if the marks of time were flowing within the Tao marking and flickered indeterminately. Forbidden death. Lin Sun came to a realization. This was the talent that he had awakened. As the name suggested, it was to confine the power that passed away. However, he couldn't calm down, because the power confined by forbidden death was too shocking, too appalling, and too incredible. Confine time in an instant. This was the greatest power of the talent, forbidden death. Only when one reached the saint realm could he master the mystery of space and have the means of space shifting. But even Emperor Realm experts couldn't touch or resist the law of time. No matter Emperor Realm experts or ants, once they died, they were destined to be eroded by the power of time and then erased. Emperor Realm experts wanted to be immortal, but the biggest threat they faced was time. The power of forbidden death could confine the passage of time for a moment. This power was so horrible that Lin Sun couldn't believe it. After a long time, he calmed down a little and sensed it carefully. It was an illusory white and magnificent strange Taoist pattern like a flying feather, obscure and mysterious. But when Lin Sun tried to sense it, he felt that he had entered into a vast and unfathomable abyss. Apart from this, he got nothing. Lin Sun was stunned and laughed at himself in his heart. Even he couldn't feel the mystery of his talent. This was really strange. But after thinking about it, Lin Sun felt relieved. The time-forbidding divine power could confine time for an instant, and it involved the law of time. Even martial emperors might not be able to understand its mysteries. He had yet to become a martial saint, and was far from being a martial emperor, so how could he understand the secrets of the law of time? It could only be said that forbidden death was an innate method, a kind of power that could be used and controlled. Its essence was not something that Lin Sun could touch and control at the moment. Even so, Lin Sun felt a burst of heat in his heart. How could he not understand the power of forbidden death? Although it could only confine time for a moment, this moment was enough to change too many things. In a battle, the outcome and life and death could be determined in a moment. Before long, Lin Sun opened his eyes. "You're awake." Beside him, the young man with golden cicada said. When Lin Sun was about to get up, he felt so tired and exhausted that he couldn't even lift a finger. In the end, he only showed a wry smile. The young man with golden cicada seemed to understand and patted Lin Sun on the shoulder. Suddenly, a strong and pure force poured into Lin Sun's body like a river. In just a few breaths, Lin Sun's fatigue was swept away, and his cultivation was restored to its original state. Lin Sun was stunned. He knew that the young man with golden cicada was an unfathomable existence, but he didn't expect that his means were so powerful. The young man with golden cicada smiled and said, "Don't you understand why I didn't give you a hand when you climbed the stone steps before?" Lin Sun got up and said, "Now I understand. It's for practice." The young man with golden cicada laughed heartily and said, "Yes, this is the pursuit of Tao. When you can walk on your own, the most taboo is to be pulled by others. It's harmful." At this time, standing in front of the gate of the Emperor Palace of 10,000 Tribulations, Lin Sun felt like standing in the sky. In front of him were layers of stone steps that extended down, and the field of vision was extremely vast. Behind him, the gate of the Emperor Palace had been open, with vast light diffusing out, which looked extremely mysterious. "Let's go." Judging from the time, the outcome of this battle for the great opportunity is about to be decided. The young man with golden cicada turned around and walked towards the gate of the Emperor Palace. From beginning to end, he didn't ask about Lin Sun's talent. Lin Sun was stunned, but he didn't say much and followed him in. The Emperor Palace, in Lin Sun's expectation, must be magical and full of mystery, with a scene that was enough to make any practitioner marvel and awe. But to Lin Sun's surprise, the Emperor Palace was empty, with only a desk and a futon. The old color of the desk was made of the most common pear wood, and the futon was also made of the most common cattail leaf. These two items could be seen everywhere in ordinary people's homes. Now they were displayed in the Emperor Palace of 10,000 tribulations. In this way, these seemingly ordinary things were very unusual. An ordinary rock, if a saint sits on it to comprehend the Tao, after being immersed in the saint's aura for many years, this rock is destined to become different. If the later generations study it, they might even be able to pry into some of the mysteries of the divine Tao. For example, this table and meditation cushion were prepared by the myriad tribulations Emperor's mother for him when he was young, and they accompanied him throughout his youth. Later on, when he attained the Tao, he always carried them with him, and he took them to be the most important things in his life. Even when he perished, he couldn't bear to see them destroyed along with him. The young man with golden cicada sighed with emotion. No matter how ordinary the desk and futon are, they are no longer ordinary when accompanied by a great emperor seeking Tao. Lin Sun was moved and shocked. This desk and futon might not be earth-shattering treasures, but they were branded with the complete experience of a great emperor. Of course, other treasures couldn't compare with them. You'd better not try to sense these two items. The young man with golden cicada reminded. No one can resist the power in it except for those in the Emperor realm. Lin Sun was shocked and immediately asked, "What's the origin of that bowl?" A rough ceramic bowl stood alone on the table. It was pitch black and seemed to be very ordinary. "Come with me." The young man with golden cicada walked to the desk, looked down at the ceramic bowl, and said, "Look, those strong people who are fighting for the great opportunity are all in it." "What?" Lin Sun's eyes narrowed, and he hurriedly stepped forward. He looked down and saw that the ceramic bowl was filled with chaotic air. It seemed to contain a vast world. This ceramic bowl was only the size of a palm, but the bottom of the bowl carried a universe. This made Lin Sun stunned. One flower, one world, one leaf, one Bodhi. Even a grain of sand can contain a universe. The young man with golden cicada said, "This is the means of the Emperor realm. Making something out of nothing?" Lin Sun blurted out. The young man with golden cicada was stunned, which was rare for him. He looked up at Lin Sun and said, "Do you also know this realm?" Lin Sun shook his head. "It's just a glimpse." The young man with golden cicada sighed and looked away. In fact, he was a little uneasy in his heart. The realm of making something out of nothing was a realm that even many emperors couldn't see. But now it was seen by a young man who hadn't become a saint. This almost subverted the young man's cognition. This is not making something out of nothing. It's just a means of putting a mountain in a mustard seed. It's the extreme use of the law of space. The young man with golden cicada said and looked at the black ceramic bowl again. P.S. Golden Fish is going abroad today, and many writers of Zongheng are with her. As for the update, Golden Fish pretentiously said, "You can see how many writers don't update and how many writers don't update." But Golden Fish could guarantee that before the 17th, there would be 2 updates a day. Golden Fish also brought a computer to go abroad. She would try to update on the 19th and 20th. He also hoped that when the children read, they wouldn't forget to cast their monthly votes to support Goldfish, who was so diligent and never forgot to type. Chapter 1479. The world in the bowl was very strange, divided into 9,999 secret realms. Each secret realm presented a different scene: wind, thunder, earth, fire, metal, wood, swamp. Different scenes of the great Tao filled each secret realm, evolving into mountains, rivers, plants, the sun, the moon, and the stars. At a glance, Lin soon saw that this world was like the steps in front of the gate of the Emperor of 10,000 Tribulations. The 9,999 secret realms were superimposed in the world in the bowl, looking very unique. This bowl is called Heaven of 10,000 Tribulations, and the world in the bowl is called Purgatory of 10,000 Tribulations, which is divided into 9,999 levels. The Golden Cicada youth explained, "This is the life weapon of the Emperor of 10,000 Tribulations, which once accompanied the Emperor to conquer the 9 heavens and 10 earths. However, now this bowl has become the birthplace of a great opportunity." Soon, Lin Sun saw many figures. There were Wu Jiuchong and others of the Voodoo barbarian Zhen Yuan, Go Tianxing and others of the Alliance of 10,000 Races. There were also terrifying creatures living in the mulberry forest, such as the 1,000-feather sword flower, blood lotus ancestor, blood-colored moths, green flood dragons, bronze ants, and so on. Zhao Yuanji and the others were also among them. However, the fierce battle Lin soon expected did not happen. These important figures of the quasi-emperor realm were almost distributed in different secret realms, just like in different interfaces. Zhao Tailai, the Empress, and the Dean of Green Deer School were located in the secret realms closest to the bottom. Further up were the Voodoo Barbarian Camp, the Alliance of 10,000 Races, and those terrifying creatures. And Zhao Yuanji was now in the lead, standing in the upper area of many secret realms. Every secret realm in the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations is full of a tribulation, just like a purgatory. The way to seize this great opportunity is very simple. Dissolve the tribulation, break the purgatory, and go up layer by layer. The Golden Cicada youth smiled. In fact, it's similar to climbing the stone steps just now, but only the quasi-emperor has the ability to resolve the tribulation in the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations. Lin Sun suddenly understood. He saw Zhao Tailai standing in the 1,300th secret realm, panting, looking very gloomy. And the tribulation he faced was a blue light rain storm. The rain of azure light was gorgeous and beautiful, like a group of azure comets dancing in the sky. But it was this beautiful rain of light that caused Zhao Tailai to cover his head and flee like a rat. He dodged in a sorry state and cursed from time to time. Immediately, Lin Sun saw the 1,000-feather sword swaying, bursting out hundreds of millions of misty sword chi, and instantly smashed a towering mountain in front of him. After that, its figure flashed, and it arrived at an even higher secret realm. Lin soon gasped in astonishment at the unparalleled fierceness of his posture. Before long, Lin soon saw another quasi-emperor of Voodoo barbarian branch, struck by a wisp of black lightning, fell to the ground, hair disheveled, and uttered an unwilling scream. Then, the quasi-emperor of Voodoo barbarian branch disappeared instantly. If you fail to transcend the tribulation, you will lose the right to fight for this great opportunity. However, he won't die. Given the 1,000 tribulations emperor's breadth of mind and boldness, he wouldn't go so far as to kill those quasi-emperors. Lin Sun finally understood it thoroughly. In this purgatory of 10,000 tribulations, every quasi-emperor had the opportunity to fight for the great opportunity, provided that they had to break through the purgatory-like secret realms. If they wanted to break through the secret realms, they must break through the tribulation distributed in the secret realms. If they were weak, they would be eliminated if they failed to transcend the tribulation. If they were strong, they could go up layer by layer. Lin soon noticed that Zhao Tailai, the Empress, and the Dean of Green Deer School had been in the lowest secret realms of the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations because they were seriously injured before. According to this situation, it was doomed to be impossible for them to fight for this great opportunity. But Lin Sun also learned that they came here to help Zhao Yuanji fight for the opportunity, so even if they failed, they wouldn't care much. To Lin Sun's surprise, Zhao Yuanji was also seriously injured, but he was now far ahead of them and was now in the 9,900th secret realm. The strongest person closest to him was the childlike Blood Lotus ancestor, who was also more than 300 secret realms away from him. Closely behind Blood Lotus ancestor was the Blood Red Moth. However, in terms of the speed of transcending the tribulation, the Blood Red Moth was obviously a little better than Blood Lotus ancestor, and it was gradually narrowing the gap between them. The young man with golden cicada seemed to see through Lin Sun's doubts. Zhao Yuanji is the first one to be selected. As soon as he entered the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations, he was far ahead of the others and had all the advantages. After thinking for a while, the young man with golden cicada added, however, Zhao Yuanji's advantage is diminishing. None of his opponents are ordinary. No wonder those old monsters didn't hesitate to besiege him at the beginning to kill him. His advantage is really too obvious. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. The young man with golden cicada laughed. Do you think only the first one to break through all the secret realms of the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations can win this great opportunity? Lin Sun was stunned. Is there any other mystery? The eyes of the young man with golden cicada were clear, and he said in a gentle voice, to become an emperor, you can't break through power by force. You need a real, invincible willpower, who is not afraid of all tribulations, not afraid of the past and the future, not constrained by the great way, and not regretting your own Taoist heart. If you think you can seize the opportunity by only relying on your strong combat power, you underestimate the difficulty of becoming an emperor. Lin Sun smiled bitterly. It's really difficult for me to understand these things. He hadn't even become a saint, so it was naturally impossible for him to understand the difficulty of becoming an emperor. It doesn't matter. You will understand it in the future. From beginning to end, the young man with golden cicada never laughed at or despised Lin Sun, nor did he show a superior or domineering attitude. He seemed very peaceful, like a gentle friend. From the outside of the palace of 10,000 tribulations to now, he had been chatting with Lin Sun. But Lin Sun knew that the so-called chatting was also a kind of guidance. Along the way, what the young man with golden cicada explained was like opening a door for Lin Sun, letting him see a higher, farther, and bigger world. At this moment, Lin Sun really felt that listening to the words of a wise man was better than reading books for 10 years. At this moment, the young man with golden cicada was stunned. He shook his head with a wry smile and said, Bai really doesn't give up. Following his gaze, Lin Sun saw a girl in white breaking through the tribulation on the 8,990th floor of the secret realm. Her hair was black, and her eyebrows were as beautiful as a young girl's. Her whole body was flowing with spirit. But when she fought, she was extremely fierce and tyrannical. Those tribulations were simply nothing to her, and she dealt with them one by one. Her white clothes fluttered as she rose up into the sky, and she seemed like a peerless female celestial of war. In just a moment, the girl had broken through more than 10 floors of the secret realm and set foot on the 9,000th floor of the secret realm. This shocked Lin Sun. Compared with the speed of Zhao Yuanji, Blood Lotus ancestor, the Blood Red Moth, and the girl in white, in an instant, he concluded that if it continued, not only the Blood Red Moth and Blood Lotus ancestor would be surpassed, but even Zhao Yuanji might be surpassed by the girl in white. This is too fierce, Lin Sun smacked his lips. The young man with golden cicada shook his head. That's because her foundation and talent occupy a great advantage. Well, she is Bai. But if you see her in the future, you can't call her like this or she will go crazy. Lin Sun was stunned and thought to himself, how dare he call such a fierce and messy quasi-emperor Bai to his face? And this title indeed seemed to be very inconsistent with the identity of a quasi-emperor. It was just like the nickname of a cat or dog. Well, her name is Emperor Bai. She has been determined to be an emperor for a long time. The reason why she came here with me and was willing to stay dormant for so many years was to become an emperor. Speaking of this, the young man with golden cicada sighed softly. Originally, I wanted to help her, but unfortunately, even if this great opportunity is given to her, she is doomed to not get what she wants. Why is that? Lin Sun was curious. The young man with golden cicada didn't explain too much, but just said, her opportunity to become an emperor is not here. Lin Sun nodded and suddenly said, she is that white cicada? The young man with golden cicada laughed and said, do you still remember the killing intent she showed to you when you first met her? Lin Sun said frankly, no one can forget this kind of experience. At that time, he wanted to get close to the holy tree of ice and snow, but he felt a terrible killing intent from a white cicada. At that time, thanks to the help of the blood-colored moth, Lin Sun escaped the disaster unscathed. The young man with golden cicada said, in fact, even if Phylan didn't help you at that time, the white cicada couldn't kill you. She just felt conflicted about your identity. Lin Sun was stunned. What identity? The successor of Mount Mind, the young man with golden cicada said. Lin Sun was shocked. Only now did he realize that the young man with golden cicada had seen a lot of things about him when they first met. Does this Emperor Bai have a grudge against Mount Mind? Lin Sun couldn't help asking. The young man with golden cicada laughed. She just suffered a loss in the hands of a successor of Mount Mind, so she has always been very unconvinced. Who? Lin Sun became more and more curious. In his view, the white cicada was already terrible enough, and the combat power it showed seemed to be more ferocious than that of the blood-red moth and ancestor blood lotus. But there was a successor of Mount Mind who made the white cicada suffer a loss, which was incredible. That person has practiced the saint method just like you. The young man with golden cicada said casually. In an instant, Lin Sun thought of a stalwart figure full of unruly aura and overwhelming combat power. When he obtained the saint method at the top of Mount Mind, Lin Sun had also seen some strange phenomena. At that time, the arrogant figure knelt alone in front of the collapsed and dilapidated gate of Mount Mind, silent like a stubborn stone. Then, the arrogant figure rose to the sky and fought fiercely with the enemy who suddenly came to kill him. Like a god of war, his figure filled the world and illuminated eternity. Was it him? Chapter 1480. My young friend, do you know the origin of the Tao test? Suddenly, the young man with golden cicada looked at Lin Sun. Yes. Lin Sun nodded. He had heard from the mysterious woman that there were 3 kinds of tribulations in the ancient desolation realm after primitive times. The first one was the Tao-cutting tribulation for the sage realm. From then on, the sages could no longer break through and step into the emperor realm. The second one was the prohibition of trapping, which made the ancient desolation realm like a cage, and trapped all the strong to explore the way of the outside world. The third one was the prohibition of trapping. From then on, the 3 paths of body refining, soul refining, and chi refining couldn't be practiced at the same time. Otherwise, they would die before becoming sages. Thinking of this, Lin Sun blurted out, in this competition for the great opportunity, if someone wants to become an emperor, he will also have to go through the Tao-cutting tribulation. The young man with golden cicada smiled. It seems that you know more than I thought. Yes, whoever seizes this great opportunity will face the Tao-cutting tribulation when he becomes an emperor. After a pause, he continued, however, you also know that now the great era is coming, and this is the origin of chaos. Even if the Tao-cutting tribulation comes, there is hope to solve it. I see. Lin Sun understood. No wonder those quasi-emperors had been dormant in the lower world for so many years. They were not only waiting for the coming of the great era, but more importantly, they wanted to seize this great opportunity to break the Tao-cutting tribulation in the great era and become an emperor. At this time, Lin Sun fully realized how difficult it was to become an emperor. In order to wait for the great era, they had to stay dormant and endure the passage of time. In order to become an emperor, they had to face the threat of the Tao-cutting tribulation. Every single step seemed to be so difficult and so dangerous. In fact, there is one thing you don't understand. After this great opportunity, all the creatures who want to leave here will also face a tribulation. The young man with golden cicada said calmly, "That's the prohibition of trapping over the whole ancient desolation realm." Lin Sun was shocked. This great opportunity had actually gathered 3 types of forbidden tribulations that had only appeared after the primeval age? It seemed incredible, but after thinking about it carefully, it was the truth. He came here to break the prohibition of trapping. In order to become a martial monarch, those quasi-martial monarchs would definitely trigger the Tao-severing tribulation. On the other hand, experts like the golden cicada young man who wanted to leave the source of chaos were bound to face the binding restriction. This is a great opportunity. Everyone has their own desires, and no one is able to escape the tribulation they will face. However, this tribulation gives everyone hope. Even though the myriad tribulations great emperor died back then, he still spent a lot of effort to set up this trap. It can be said that he put a lot of thought into it. The golden cicada youth sighed with a hint of admiration. A great emperor who could look down on all the heavens was still seeking a great opportunity for the future generations before his death. How many people in the world could compare to such a breadth of mind and boldness? This was the true demeanor of an emperor. At this moment, Lin Sun couldn't help but admire him. At this moment, the young man turned to look at Lin Sun and said, "Little friend, you can take action now." "Me?" Lin Sun was stunned. Isn't it said that only martial artists in the quasi-emperor realm can enter the world of the heaven-transforming bowl? The tribulation has been resolved by those quasi-emperors. You will be fine if you go there. The young man with the golden cicada smiled, and then reminded, "The forbidden Tao tribulation is not a tribulation that you triggered yourself, but a calamity that targets cultivators. Such a tribulation is like a sinister enemy, and you alone are bound to be unable to resist it. Only when you enter the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations and face this tribulation will be triggered by the whole purgatory of 10,000 tribulations. At that time, other quasi-emperors distributed in the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations will inevitably share this tribulation with you. In this way, your chance of success will be much greater." After hearing this, Lin Sun looked strange. Isn't this tantamount to framing those old monsters? The golden cicada youth laughed. "Why, you don't want to?" Lin Sun couldn't help laughing, and then cupped his hands to salute. "Senior, thank you for your guidance." The golden cicada youth said, "Go ahead. Put your consciousness into this bowl, and you can enter the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations. Now the time is ripe. It will be a pity if you miss it." Lin Sun no longer hesitated and started to take action. Buzz, as soon as his consciousness touched the myriad tribulation heaven transformation bowl, his entire body suddenly vanished on the spot. 3 taboo tribulations in a trap set by the great emperor of 10,000 tribulations, plus this boy is a variable. It can be said that there are many tribulations and there are changes in the tribulations. The golden cicada youth's clear eyes glowed with wisdom, and he murmured in his heart, "Without this boy, I'm afraid this variable will not be so easily triggered." Thinking of this, the golden cicada youth smiled silently. The so-called fate is really wonderful. What a magical place. Lin Sun showed a look of surprise. At this time, he stood in a sea of clouds. The sea of clouds was magnificent, covering the mountains and rivers between heaven and earth. The fog was constantly rolling and evaporating. In the sea of clouds, the breath was full of the taste of tribulation, as if it was everywhere. Standing here, Lin Sun keenly felt a kind of danger. Like a sudden impulse, it became difficult to breathe, and there was a feeling of fear in his mind, body, and even cultivation. It was as if a strange and terrifying power had already locked onto him from the unseen world. Lin Sun's expression became solemn. He knew that this was probably a sign that the forbidden Tao tribulation was coming. However, he was not afraid in his heart. After a month of enlightenment in front of the Taoist mountain, he attracted the ninth tribulation of longevity, and his cultivation of qi refining and body refining entered the ninth tribulation of longevity at one stroke. At the same time, the power of body refining with the help of thunder tribulation produced a transformation and reached the eighth tribulation of longevity. Not long ago, he had stepped onto the 9,999 stone step. After going through a series of tempering, his body tempering cultivation had already entered the longevity ninth retribution realm. He had truly advanced side by side with his qi refinement and soul tempering cultivation. That was to say, his cultivation was only one big threshold away from becoming a sage. Therefore, the arrival of the forbidden Tao tribulation at this time was within Lin Sun's expectation, and he had made enough preparations for it. Suddenly, the sky suddenly darkened. Lin Sun looked up and saw that there was a strange crack in the sky. It was as if the curtain of the sky had been torn apart, revealing a boundlessly deep and bizarre pitch-black color. An oppressive and suffocating aura of the forbidden tribulation began to spread out from the crack in the sky. The world was dead silent and the air seemed to be stagnant. Lin Sun's hair stood on end. His mind, soul, and body all had a fatal sense of cold danger in an instant. In the past, Lin Sun had gone through many tribulations and seen all kinds of peerless, strange, and abnormal tribulation thunder. But he had never seen such a strange and terrible tribulation power like the one in front of him. This reminded him of the power of cutting Tao sealed in the Bodhi wood, and the terrible taboo power that descended when Holy Monk Du Ji and Black Phoenix Holy Empress were killed. He also remembered that every time the mysterious woman appeared in the world, she would be targeted by the spear of cutting Tao. Then, Lin Sun was completely sure that the forbidden Tao tribulation, the restriction of trapping, and the tribulation of cutting Tao should be from the same source as the mysterious woman said. But the target was different, so the power should be different. At this time, Lin Sun found it difficult to breathe, and his whole body was stiff. The three kinds of Tao power that he cultivated simultaneously were all suppressed when running, and there was a slight feeling of sluggishness. This made Lin Sun look more and more serious. The forbidden Tao tribulation was really not simple. At the same time, the golden cicada youth in the imperial palace of 10,000 tribulations looked out of the gate of the imperial palace and saw a crack in the sky above the mulberry forest. The tribulation has come. Just wait for the variable to happen. A frightening light suddenly flashed in the eyes of the golden cicada youth. His linen clothes fluttered in the wind, and his expression was calm. And in different secret realms of the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations, strange taboo aura also appeared, which aroused the vigilance of many quasi-emperors. Has someone seized a great opportunity and ushered in the tribulation of cutting Tao before becoming an emperor? The face of the childlike blood lotus ancestor darkened, and he was extremely shocked and angry. How could this be? Zhao Yuanji was stunned and extremely surprised. Presently, he was standing at the 9,997th secret realm, and he wasn't far away from the last secret realm. Could it be that white cicada? He thought of the white-clothed girl who had leaped in front of him, and his heart sank. No, why can't it be me? The white cicada girl was also astonished at this moment. She was in the last secret realm, but she had not yet broken through. But she was already convinced that she would be the first person to break through the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations and seize this great opportunity. But now, something like this had actually happened. This caught her completely off guard. Damn it! It can't be, why is this happening? At the same time, The expressions of the quasi-emperors who had not been eliminated in the other secret realms changed, and their hearts surged with indignation. For example, the thousand-feather sword flower, Wu Jiuchong, Ju Tianxing, the dark green flood dragon, and so on. Many people even roared loudly, unable to accept this reality. They had bitterly endured for so long, but in the end it was all for naught. Even as quasi-emperors, they could not bear such a blow. Everyone, don't be alarmed. This is not the arrival of the tribulation of cutting Tao. Suddenly, the clear and gentle voice of the golden cicada youth resounded in the purgatory of 10,000 realms, and every quasi-emperor heard it clearly. Immediately, many quasi-emperors realized who the speaker was, and their expressions all relaxed. It was that golden cicada. What he said naturally could not be false. And did this mean that this great opportunity had not been seized by anyone? Thinking of this, many people could not help but feel a glimmer of hope in their hearts. The anger, indignation, bitterness, and helplessness from before were swept away. Chapter 1481. Many quasi-emperors could not help but reveal a joyful and relaxed smile. In the face of the hope of becoming an emperor that they had been longing for countless years, no one could remain indifferent. It was precisely because they were too nervous and focused on it that their mood fluctuated greatly. I knew that you, golden cicada, would not leave me alone. A smile appeared on the young girl's picturesque face. She knew that as long as golden cicada helped her, this great opportunity would definitely be hers. It's not the Tao-cutting tribulation. Zhao Yuanji breathed a sigh of relief. Ha ha, that's great. Blood Lotus ancestor laughed. However, there was still a trace of doubt in their hearts. Since it was not the Tao-cutting tribulation, why would there be such a taboo aura in this world? At this moment, the voice of the young man with golden cicada sounded again. However, this is indeed a great tribulation known as the Tao-cutting tribulation. It comes from a young friend, but it needs to be shared by all of you. I believe that with your noble character and unquestionable integrity, you will certainly be very happy to help the younger generation. I, golden cicada, thank you in advance. His words stunned all the quasi-emperors. The Tao-cutting tribulation? They all thought of one person at the same time, Lin Sun. All of a sudden, the faces of many quasi-emperors darkened. Share? This was clearly framing them and using their strength to help that boy overcome the tribulation. The faces of some quasi-emperors darkened at the thought of being inexplicably schemed against. Like Wu Jiuchong, Thousand Feather Sword Flower, and other old monsters who had been scolded by Lin Sun, they were so angry that their noses were smoking. Even some quasi-emperors who had never had a grudge against Lin Sun felt very uncomfortable. They had been schemed against by an ant who did not even take them seriously. This feeling was too disgusting and irritating. Zhao Yuanji, the Empress, Zhao Tailai, and the Dean of Green Deer School wore strange expressions. They did not expect that Lin Sun would do such a thing at this time. He actually wanted to use the hands of a group of quasi-emperors to resolve the Tao-cutting tribulation. This method caused Zhao Yuanji and the others to sigh with admiration, and they clicked their tongues in admiration. It must be Golden Cicada's idea. Fei Lan, the man in white that the blood-colored moth had transformed into, immediately guessed the truth. In the countless years he had spent in the mulberry forest, the one thing he could not see through the most was the golden cicada. In fact, in the eyes of all the living beings in the mulberry forest, the golden cicada was the only unfathomable and unfathomable existence. What dogs hit noble character and unquestionable integrity? Helping the younger generation? I really want to kill this brat, yet he wants me to help him? No way. The thousand-feather sword flower howled. Humph, I won't agree to this either. Ancestor Blood Lotus snorted. I'm afraid you can't refuse. After this tribulation descends, it will trigger all kinds of tribulations in the entire 10,000 tribulations purgatory. You have no choice but to face it. If that's the case, why don't you just accept it? The voice of the golden cicada youth rang out again. The thousand-feather sword flower, the blood lotus ancestor, Wu Jiuchong, Go Tianxing, and the other old monsters all had ugly expressions on their faces. Submit to adversity? What did he take them, quasi-emperors, for? Forming good karma? Did he think that they were good people who repaid evil with good? This was really too depressing. Previously, in front of the 10,000 Tribulations Emperor Palace, Lin Sun alone had destroyed their plan to besiege Zhao Yuanji and the others, so that Zhao Yuanji now had the upper hand in the 10,000 Tribulations Purgatory. It was also because of Lin Sun that Fei Lan was lured out and pierced a petal of the thousand-feather sword flower with the insignificant spiritual bough, which shocked the crowd. But no matter how angry they were, they couldn't do anything to Lin Sun, because not only was Fei Lan around, but Lin Sun was also protected by 7 terrifying monsters, so they couldn't even pinch this ant to death. And now, this kid actually dared to plot against them, and wanted to use their strength to resolve the Tao tribulation of the broken Tao. Didn't he put quasi-emperors in his eyes? Since when did an ant dare to provoke them again and plot against them? In his heart, what did he take quasi-emperors for? The more these old monsters thought about it, the more annoyed they felt, as if they had eaten a dead fly. The most unbearable thing was that they had no choice but to accept it passively, no matter how good-tempered they were, how well-bred they were, how tenacious they couldn't help but have an impulse to go crazy at this moment. And Zhao Yuanji and the others were all smiling happily. Speaking of which, since the appearance of Lin Sun, their luck seemed to have turned for the better. Not only did he solve the predicament, but he also came all the way to the present. How could they not be happy? Quasi-emperors were also living people, with 7 emotions and 6 desires, good and evil likes and dislikes. The higher their cultivation and strength, the less they would hide their emotions, likes and dislikes. Because they were strong enough, they had no scruples. If one were to think that those great figures that stood high up above treated humiliation and provocation as nothing, that they were emotionless, and that they didn't have any emotions, then that would be a huge mistake. At this time, Lin Sun had no time to think too much. His mind was tense, and his expression was unprecedentedly dignified and vigilant. In the long and narrow crack in the sky, the obscure and terrible taboo power was constantly accumulating, becoming more and more terrifying. Only then did Lin Sun realize that even if he had made full preparations, he still far underestimated the horror of the Tao tribulation of the broken Tao. This tribulation was simply not something that any strong man on the road of immortality could resolve. Boom! Suddenly, a battle spear formed from the taboo tribulation aura condensed from the crack. It was filled with the destructive taboo order power. As soon as it appeared, Lin Sun's expression changed. I can't block it. This was his instinctive feeling, and it was extremely strong. However, as soon as this battle spear appeared, the 10,000 purgatory realms that had evolved into a bowl gave off a roar. Tens of thousands of tribulation auras surged out of every secret realm, like a turbulent, tumbling net of tribulation. When the taboo battle spear fell, it instantly collided with the endless tribulation aura. Rumble! The deafening roar sounded like the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. The terrible taboo aura of destruction began to rush into the different secret realms of the 10,000 purgatory realms. Damn it! Someone roared angrily. So it's really like this. Someone's expression changed, and he believed the golden cicada youth's words. Damn it, I can't believe I was tricked by something lower than an ant. Someone was flustered and exasperated. Especially thousand-feather sword flower, blood lotus ancestor, Wu Jiuchong, Go Tianxing, and the others. Their faces were as black as the bottom of a pot, and they were so angry that they almost coughed up blood. But no matter how unwilling and depressed they didn't dare to be careless at this time. They could only resist. This was because the secret realms they were in were all suffering from the attacks of the taboo power of destruction. Lin Sun's black eyes brightened, and he heaved a long sigh of relief from his extreme nervousness and depression. He had already sensed that the taboo tribulation power had been broken down into many turbulent flows. When it descended in front of him, it had less than 1,000th of its original power. It seemed extremely weak, no different from an ordinary tribulation lightning. But because this taboo power was extremely strange and special, Lin Sun didn't dare to be careless. He circulated the energy in his body and used his cultivation method to resist. Boom! In an instant, the taboo power of destruction was shattered, turning into a rain of light that scattered and disappeared. Lin Sun didn't relax because more and more taboo power was surging out of the crack in the sky and descending. But compared to before, Lin Sun had recovered absolute confidence. He used his Tao and cultivation method, soared into the sky, and killed to his heart's content. Of course, he knew very well that the reason for this was that most of the power of the Tao tribulation had been shared by the other quasi-emperors. This time I really have to thank all of you. Lin Sun sighed. He didn't know that in the other secret realms, the old quasi-emperors who hated him to the bone had already cursed him, and their faces were so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. They had been tricked by an ant and succeeded. This was an unprecedented shame and humiliation for the high and mighty quasi-emperors who were superior to all saints. This is the variable. All tribulations are destined to change according to the variable. In the 10,000 Tribulation Emperor Palace, the young man with the golden cicada clapped his hands and laughed. He was very pleased to witness all this, because this was what he was happy to see. I feel it. Suddenly, Zhao Yuanji, who was standing in the 9,998th secret realm and fighting against the power of the Tao tribulation, suddenly trembled, and a dazzling light shot out of his eyes. His face was full of surprise. It was the power of the great opportunity. As a quasi-emperor, a strange scene appeared in Zhao Yuanji's mind. He saw a path that led to the heavens. That path was so dazzling, sacred, supreme, mysterious, and unfathomable that it made his mind tremble. At the same time, the 10,000 Tribulation Purgatory Palace trembled. In the 10,000 Tribulation Emperor Palace, the 10,000 Tribulation Heaven Transformation Bowl that was quietly placed on the table also began to buzz and tremble, and mysterious ripples appeared on its rough black surface. Tribulation after tribulation, change after change. The young man with the golden cicada's eyes shone brightly, and his body exuded a shocking aura. At this moment, in the 10,000 Tribulation Purgatory, the quasi-emperors who were fighting against the Tao tribulation sensed something, and their expressions changed drastically. The power of the great opportunity had been snatched away by someone. Who was it? They were all shocked and furious, and their hearts surged with unspeakable indignation. Originally, they were extremely depressed because they had been tricked by Lin Sun, and now that they sensed that the great opportunity had been snatched away, this heavy blow made them so angry that they almost vomited blood. Fei Lan frowned and let out a long sigh. The Blood Lotus ancestor let out a hoarse roar and went completely crazy. The aura of the 1,000-feather sword flower suddenly became extremely violent. The other quasi-emperors such as Wu Jiuchong, Go Tianxing, and the other quasi-emperors almost went crazy. Why did this happen? They had waited bitterly for countless years, and this was the result they got? Indignation. No one knew better than them how great the blow they would suffer from missing such a great opportunity. Golden Cicada, you said that you would help me. Why did this happen? Chapter 1482. The white cicada girl was furious. Her beautiful face was full of violence and coldness. She was only one step away from breaking through the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations. She thought that with the help of the golden cicada youth, this great opportunity was destined to be at her fingertips. Who would have thought that this great opportunity would be snatched away by someone in advance? I have been dormant with you for countless years. Is this how you treat me?" The white cicada girl shouted angrily. She called herself Emperor Bai. Naturally, she had been longing to become an emperor. But now, the hope that she had been waiting for countless years was completely lost. How could she be reconciled to this? She knew that the golden cicada youth must have heard it. "I said that this great opportunity does not belong to you. This time I brought you here to prove this point, so that you will not be obsessed with it." Sure enough, before long, the golden cicada youth sighed. "Bai, if you still believe in me as before, when we leave here, I will find an opportunity for you to become an emperor." The white cicada girl gnashed her teeth and trembled with hatred. The next opportunity to become an emperor? Do I have to wait for countless years? No, it will be soon. The golden cicada youth's voice was firm. In today's great world, it is completely different from the past. The white cicada girl was silent for a long time, barely suppressing her anger and disappointment, and said coldly, "From today on, before I become an emperor, you are not allowed to call me Bai." The golden cicada youth also stood in the palace of 10,000 tribulations, and was silent for a moment. Finally, he sighed softly and said nothing. Lin Sun was unaware of all the changes. He was fighting against the Tao test with all his strength. Although he knew that most of the power of this great tribulation was shared by the other quasi-emperors, he did not dare to have any carelessness. Different from the tribulation of cultivation, passing the Tao test would not bring any benefits to Lin Sun's own cultivation. But as long as he broke through this tribulation, he could continue to cultivate the top 3 paths, and he could pursue the 3 paths of qi refining, soul refining, and body refining, and set foot on the road to the top of the saint realm. This was what Lin Sun longed for. However, this great tribulation was like a sudden disaster for the quasi-emperors who were distributed in different secret realms of the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations. Their faces were as black as the bottom of a pot, and they cursed Lin Sun's ancestors in their hearts. It was too aggrieving. They would absolutely not be so infuriated if they were schemed against by an opponent of the same level, but when an ant that they didn't take seriously stepped on their heads and pissed on them, that feeling was beyond disgusting. "Don't let me catch you." The Blood Lotus ancestors' eyes were spitting fire. Damn it. Some of the more good-tempered and tenacious quasi-emperors could not help cursing out loud. How can this kid jump around like this? Why didn't the Tao tribulation of the severing Tao strike him to death? Wu Jiuchong, Go Tianxing and the rest were flustered and exasperated. In fact, the most fundamental reason was that they were not only set up by Lin Sun this time, but also missed a great opportunity to become an emperor. This was the root cause of their rage and unwillingness. However, all of them attributed the reason to Lin Sun. They felt that if Lin Sun hadn't suddenly brought down the Tao tribulation, causing them to have no choice but to resist it passively, then they would definitely not have missed this great opportunity right before their eyes. In the end, the severing Tao tribulation disappeared, neutralized without any mishaps. There were no accidents. It would be abnormal if they still could not survive the tribulation in a special and mysterious world like the 10,000 tribulations purgatory, with a group of quasi-emperors sharing the power of the Great Tribulation. However, before those quasi-emperors could heave a sigh of relief, they suddenly realized that the huge tear in the sky had not disappeared. The terrifying forbidden tribulation aura that filled the tear was 100 or even 1,000 times more terrifying than before. Even with their quasi-emperor cultivation, they felt their hearts tremble and their hair stand on end. This, the severing Tao tribulation. This is actually true. That great opportunity has been snatched away by someone. For a moment, the expressions of the group of quasi-emperors changed drastically, their expressions alternating between green and white. They felt depressed, as if thousands of horses were galloping in their hearts, and they were so angry that they almost coughed up blood. The Severing Tao tribulation was the most terrifying forbidden tribulation that every Saint Realm expert would encounter before becoming an emperor. From ancient times until now, it was unknown how many amazing experts had been stopped at this stage, not fated to become an emperor. Although the quasi-emperor was above the Saint Realm, in the final analysis, it was between the Saint Realm and the Emperor Realm, and they also had to face the Severing Tao tribulation. Moreover, if these quasi-emperors didn't guess wrong, the power of this Severing Tao tribulation would probably be shared by them, just like the previous Severing Tao tribulation. For a moment, they all wanted to cry but had no tears. This was not just a trap, but a wedding dress for others. They were sad and resentful that they didn't get the great opportunity, and now they had to help the guy who got the great opportunity share the risk of crossing the tribulation. It was really too depressing. After so long, it's finally coming. At the same time, Zhao Yuanji's purple robe was fluttering, and his eyebrows were full of disdain. He knew that after this tribulation, there would be no obstacle for him to become an emperor. My little friend, it's time to come back. In the Palace of 10,000 Tribulations, the young man with golden cicada reached out his hand and scooped up the heaven-transforming bowl. Buzz, with a strange fluctuation, Lin Sun's figure suddenly returned to the hall. Lin Sun was in a trance. Until now, he couldn't believe that he had crossed the Severing Tao tribulation in this way. It was not too easy, but too incredible. The corner of the golden cicada young man's mouth raised into a strange curve, probably guessing Lin's thoughts. He thought to himself that if Lin could see how badly those quasi-emperors scolded him, he would understand how difficult it was to pass this tribulation. After a while, Lin Sun completely sobered up and said, "Senior, thank you for your guidance." He knew that the reason why he could cross the Severing Tao tribulation in such an incredible way was completely inseparable from the guidance of the young man with golden cicada. The young man with golden cicada smiled and said, "Even if I didn't give you guidance, Zhao Yuanji would help you fight for this opportunity. I just pushed the boat with the current to help you, Zhao Yuanji and me." Lin Sun was stunned. The young man with golden cicada pointed to the heaven-transforming bowl and said, "You see, this great opportunity was obtained by Zhao Yuanji. At this time, it has aroused the hostility of the Severing Tao tribulation. However, like you, when Zhao Yuanji crosses this tribulation, the other quasi-emperors can only passively share the power of the tribulation." Lin Sun's expression also became strange. At this time, he was already a bystander, and he had a panoramic view of what was happening in the purgatory of 10,000 tribulations. He also saw that whether it was the ancestor of Blood Lotus, Thousand Feather Sword Flower, Wu Jiuchong, Go Tianxing, or the others, they all looked very terrible and were shouting and cursing. They didn't look like a group of quasi-emperors, but a group of shrews cursing in the street. Lin Sun's eyes widened and he couldn't help laughing. However, when he noticed the Severing Tao tribulation, triggered by Zhao Yuanji, the smile on Lin Sun's face suddenly disappeared, and he became surprised and doubtful. Above the sky, a huge crack appeared in the void, and a spear of Severing Tao emerged. It was full of the forbidden power that could destroy the world, and it was extremely terrifying. Lin Sun was sure that he had seen such a tribulation. In the temple under the sticks, he had seen the scene of the holy monk Du Ji and the Black Phoenix Holy Empress crossing the tribulation. At that time, these two powerful figures had gone through countless years of deduction, meditation, and communication, and together, they wrote a scripture of tranquility under the Bodhi tree. At that time, the holy monk Du Ji once said that he had seen a higher realm, and said, "If I am a devil, I will redeem all the Buddhas in the world as devils." But then, he said another sentence, "If I am a Buddha, there will be no devils in the world." Then, a great taboo tribulation came. This tribulation turned into a taboo spear, and in the end, a golden figure even appeared in the huge crack in the sky, like a ruler descending to the world, and his power shook the 9 heavens and 10 earths. In the end, the holy monk Du Ji and the Black Phoenix Holy Empress both suffered a tribulation. Lin Sun clearly remembered that the Black Phoenix Holy Empress had said to the holy monk Du Ji at that time, "When we take this step, we are destined to be like this. All the sages of ancient times are like this." Now, when he saw the scene of the severing Tao tribulation, targeting Zhao Yuanji, Lin Sun finally confirmed one thing. The great tribulation that made the holy monk Du Ji and the Black Phoenix Holy Empress suffer was the tribulation of severing Tao. It turns out that the two seniors were already in the realm of Quasi-Emperor when they wrote the Scripture of Tranquility. Lin Sun's heart was in turmoil. Look, this is the true face of the tribulation of severing Tao. The eyes of the young man with golden cicada glowed with a frightening light, and his voice was low. Lin Sun looked up, and suddenly his scalp was numb. In the tribulation of severing Tao that Zhao Yuanji and the others were facing, the golden figure appeared again. The golden figure seemed thin, but it gave people a sense of infinity. It filled the world and oppressed the earth, as if it was the only ruler of all the heavens. In his palm, there was a golden halberd full of forbidden and destructive aura. Just by looking at it, Lin Sun's blood seemed to freeze. His soul was about to collapse, and a great fear arose in his heart. It was him, the culprit who made the holy monk Du Ji and the Black Phoenix Holy Empress fail to pass the tribulation. Senior, is this a creature formed by the tribulation of severing Tao? Lin Sun suppressed the fear in his heart and asked in a low voice. The young man with golden cicada shook his head. It should be said that this creature is just formed by the power of the law of will, and this power comes from an extremely powerful existence. You must have wondered why the ancient desolation realm was shrouded by 3 kinds of taboo tribulations after the primitive times. The reason is very simple. The 3 taboo tribulations came from the master of the law of will. Hearing this, Lin Sun trembled all over and almost couldn't believe his ears. The 3 taboo tribulations of severing Tao, trapping Tao, and severing Tao, which had shrouded the ancient desolation realm since ancient times, were actually created by one person? Who was he? What kind of terrible power did he have to turn the power of the law of will into the 3 taboo tribulations and cover the whole ancient desolation realm? Because of his power, since ancient times, countless practitioners dared not to practice 3 kinds of Tao at the same time, so that all the saints in the ancient desolation realm would be erased before they became emperors, so that billions of creatures in the ancient desolation realm were trapped in a cage and lost the opportunity to explore the outside world.